Good morning, Commissioners, Chief Moore, Mr. Teefank, Madam Secretary, Mr. Inspector General Mark Smith, Mr. City Attorney Carlos De La Guerra, and members of the public. Today is Tuesday, September 12, 2023. It is 9:30 a.m. This is a regular meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning. Please let the record reflect that Commissioners Suthers, Shields, Briggs, Calanche, and Garcia are present, and we have a quorum. Mr. President?
Thank you. We welcome everyone attending this morning. The Police Commission is committed to ensuring equal access to all its meetings. It is requested that individuals who require the services of a translator contact the board secretary no later than the day preceding the meeting. Whenever possible, a translator will be provided. Sign language interpreters, assistive listening devices, or other auxiliary aids and/or services may be provided upon request. To ensure availability, you are advised to make your request at least 72 hours prior to the meeting you wish to attend. All public comment will be heard during item number 2 on the agenda. We will dedicate a total of 45 minutes to public comment. Members of the public will have 1 minute per agenda item for a maximum of 2 minutes total. At the request of the speaker will be given 1 additional minute for general public comment for a maximum of 3 minutes total. The order of the speakers will be: a speaker in this room will go first, then we will take a speaker watching today's meeting on Zoom. We will alternate between speakers in the room and Zoom for a total of 45 minutes. Members of the public who participate in public comment are reminded that they can speak to any item on the agenda or a matter within the jurisdiction of the Board of Police Commissioners. Public comment is your opportunity to address the board, so you are free to express your opinion on matters before the board and to generally express when you disagree with other opinions expressed. However, directing your comments to other individuals who have spoken or attacking others who have expressed their opinions shall be deemed off-topic, and your public comment period will be concluded. Members of the public, if you choose to participate in public comment portion of the agenda, you can participate in this meeting a number of ways outlined on the agenda. 1, submit a speaker card to one of the officers who will then give the card to the board secretary, indicating you wish to speak during the meeting. 2, you may submit a written public comment in advance of the meeting to the email address policecommission@lapd.online. 3, if you've logged into Zoom, raise your virtual hand. And lastly, or if you call into a phone number listed on the agenda and press star 9 if you wish to speak on the agenda item. If you wish to just listen to the meeting, you can call into the phone numbers listed on the agenda that is designated for call-in and listening. Message for those attending the meeting in person. These meetings are regular meetings between the board, the department, and key stakeholders. Meetings of the Board of Police Commissioners are open to the public. The state's Ralph M. Brown Act affords the public the opportunity to be present at the meetings, hear the presentations and dialogue in real time, and provide feedback via the public comment period. During these meetings, there is a need for the board to carry out public business expeditiously without delays or disruptions. Members of the audience shall not engage in any conduct which causes an actual disruption of the meeting. Those attending the meeting in person are reminded that disruptive behavior will be cause for removal. If you disrupt this meeting, you will be provided with only 1 warning: to cease disruptive behavior. If you fail to cease such behavior, you will be removed from the meeting. While in the boardroom, members of the audience must be seated. Standing is not permitted. In the past, standing may have been permitted for a few, but going forward, this courtesy will not be afforded to attendees except for credentialed members of the press. All attendees must be seated. Failure to follow this rule will result in a warning and/or removal from the meeting. Additionally, I will make note that the board's approved rules do state that signs, posters, banners, or other display materials which disrupt or otherwise impede the orderly conduct of the meeting or which create any obstruction to any one other person's attendance at the meeting or ability to view or participate in the meeting are prohibited. Failure to follow this rule will result in a warning and/or removal from the meeting. At this time, we will move on to item Number one, the report of the Chief of Police, Chief Moore.
Good morning, Commissioner President Suthers, Vice President Shields, Commissioner Briggs, Commissioner Kalanche, and a special welcome to appointed Commissioner Garcia. Welcome on board. Thank you for stepping forward as a member of our community to provide such an important leadership role overseeing this department. This is an opportunity for you to work with us on a new level. We've known each other as well as members of the organization and seen your work with Homeboys industry as well as for a decade with gang reduction, youth development, and those as a regional coordinator there. Plus your longstanding residency in the Valley and seeing the interplay between police and community and the critical importance of both in working together towards the safety of this city. So I look forward to working with you on the critical issues, and again, welcome on board and thank you for joining us. This morning, as I do each week, I'll talk about significant issues and events. First, in regards to the events, I had the distinct honor of appearing as a panelist on the recent U.S. Conference of Mayors this past Friday. I joined a number of other panelists to speak about gun violence, particularly the issue of ghost guns, privately manufactured guns, and the impact that we're seeing on our communities with their proliferation, as well as what our strategies are in combating. I am happy to report that we are seeing progress on this issue with both actions legislatively as well as with targeted enforcement actions of those that are actually manufacturing these guns, specifically to feed a supply of dangerous and deadly weapons to those that are prohibited to possess firearms otherwise. We've seen just a few years ago, where more than 22% of guns recovered were these privately manufactured guns. That number has now been reduced to 16%, while the overall number of guns that we're recovering is also being reduced. We're still well above the pre-pandemic highs, the pre-pandemic numbers as far as guns being recovered and guns being used in the commission of crimes. But I'm hopeful that, again, these strategies are beginning to take hold. And it was an opportunity for us to showcase our work and also hear from others to hear their success and challenges. Secondly, I had the opportunity to continue my attendance there, where Mayor Bass attended as a panelist on issues of homelessness and the Inside Safe initiative that she has hit the ground running with, and again, hearing the challenges that other mayors across the United States are facing in regards to dealing with what we believe is the humanitarian crisis of our generation, that being the instances of homelessness. While there, I also attended the Los Angeles Police Protective Delegates Conference and had the opportunity to speak for well over an hour and a half with the rank and file delegates of the organization. And we spoke about issues of employee wellness, questions, concerns relative to discipline and ensuring its timeliness as well as fairness, staffing levels, as well as the condition of our facilities and equipment. And what I gained from this was a great opportunity for us to demonstrate that we're on common ground and that the leadership of this organization joins with its rank and file in recognizing the challenges before us. I want to thank Commissioner Suthers for attending there as well, and the previous day, and I know you spent some valuable time with the members of the delegate corps as well. Look forward to working with you as to issues that was raised with you by them, as we again work to understand our most important resource, that being our people, and how we can best meet their needs as they go about providing for the safety of the city. The next event I would like to speak about is really a tremendous occasion to honor the work, a lifelong work of a religious leader, and that is Pastor J. Edgar Boyd. On Sunday, I attended a jazz festival that was really a culmination of a 3-day event by FAME, First AME Church, to recognize him as a leader, not only within his congregation, but really within this entire community. His interplay by his participation on the statewide RIPA board, his interplay with me personally, as well as other leaders within this department on critical issues of gaining and building trust. When we get it right, when we get it wrong, he's been a constant confidant of one that I can rely upon. And we are going to see, after 52 years of his service in this as a shepherd in the FAME organization, he is now retiring, and it was an opportunity to recognize him and bring some well-deserved kudos to the work and dedication. He will be missed. Yesterday, I want to now close with, was also a tremendous day as the country recognized the 22nd occasion, 22nd years since the horrific morning of September 11th and the attacks on the homeland and the tremendous loss of life that occurred. I want to thank Commissioner Shields for attending that as well. It was Mayor Bass was there with Chief Crawley as our host. And it was an opportunity to again, draw all of Los Angeles together to whether one recognizes where they were that fateful morning and the uncertainty of the aftermath of America being under attack. What I wanted to recognize was what we did then, we can and will do today, which is work together, find common ground, to find ways to work through the discord and the, at times, hateful instances of violence against people because of differences observed. I also want to recognize that today is National Police Women's Day, recognizing the contribution of women within law enforcement. The critical point over my 4 decades of service is seeing the growth and expansion of women in their representation at all ranks of the organization. They have brought to this profession wisdom. They have brought patience. They have brought means of communicating a style, a temperament of approaching difficult and trying circumstances, and it's allowed us with that insight to take on new strategies and understand better ways in which to communicate and work in providing for public safety. This last week, we did see instances of a law enforcement-related injury, an officer-involved shooting that did not result in a hit, and as well as an officer-involved shooting involving an animal. I'll briefly discuss those now. In regards to the law enforcement-related injury, it occurred on the 29th of August, which this is covering a 2-week period with us not meeting after Labor Day last week. On the 29th of August, at about 2:52 in the afternoon, on that date, 77th Division uniform officers received a radio call of an assault with a deadly weapon suspect. The individual was reportedly armed with a knife and located in the 900 block of West 47th. Officers arrived at the location and observed that the subject, later identified as Jose Martinez Collier, a male Hispanic 41 years of age, was barricaded inside of a residence with the victim while possibly armed with a knife. Officers asked for additional units and a supervisor, and as those resources arrived, the officers entered the residence, one armed with a less lethal 40-millimeter launcher. As officers gave numerous commands and identified Mr. Collier and asked him and directed him to surrender, he armed himself with a knife. Allegedly, he raised that knife, which led to an officer deploying a less lethal munition, striking him in the right wrist. Several minutes later, Mr. Collier surrendered to the officers and was taken into custody without further incident. He was transported to a nearby hospital where he was admitted in stable condition for an injury that he had received to his arm and his wrist by the deployment of that less lethal munition. He was later booked on a misdemeanor warrant and was undergoing a mental health evaluation given the circumstances of this event. A kitchen knife, 6-inch blade with a black handle, as well as 3 additional kitchen knives were recovered from the scene. Those will be part of the investigation. There was no other community members that were injured and no officers were injured. And Force Investigation Division will investigate this law enforcement-related injury. On the 9th of September, we, at about 1 o'clock in the morning, 1:45 in the morning, Hollywood Division uniform officers were flagged down by security guards in front of a nightclub located at the southwest corner of Hollywood Boulevard and Ivar. There, security guards advised the officers that a group of patrons were fighting and pointed out a male who appeared to be the cause of the altercation. The officers observed the individual, a male white, and he was approximately 30 years of age, and then observed that the individual entered the driver's seat of a white Mercedes that was parked on Ivar. The individual, once he entered his car, drove the vehicle in reverse, negotiated a turn, and stopped in the middle of the street. As the officers drove towards the suspect's vehicle, the suspect reportedly, while still seated, pointed a handgun outside of the driver's window and fired approximately 4 or 5 rounds towards the people on the sidewalk, which resulted in an officer-involved shooting. The individual in the car immediately fled, and the officers gave chase, however, lost sight of the individual and the vehicle, and the pursuit was terminated. This time, we have no one that was injured or known to be injured by this attack. Officers were also not injured. Force Investigations and Robbery and Homicide Division are investigating, and the department is asking for anyone who has information regarding the individual responsible for this attack to come forward. It can do so either anonymously through Crime Stoppers or by contacting a local police station. Next event occurred yesterday morning at about just after midnight. Then Hollywood Division uniform officers responded to a radio call of a battery suspect at a liquor store located in the 6000 block of West Sunset Boulevard. As officers arrived at the location, they observed an individual later identified as Robert Thomas, a male white, 22 years of age, being escorted out of the Sunset Rooftop Bar by security. That bar is located on the second floor of a multi-story shopping center. Mr. Thomas appeared to be intoxicated but was cooperative. Officers were unable to locate any victim of a crime and requested for the individual to leave the location, which he initially complied. As officers prepared to leave the location, they entered their vehicle and drove from the parking lot. It appears that Mr. Thompson approached the driver's side of the police vehicle and attempted to manipulate the rear driver's side door. The driving officer verbalized to Mr. Thompson to step back, which he appeared to comply as the officers then left the location and went westbound. Thompson apparently became caught or held onto the driver's side door and was pulled approximately 15 feet before falling on the roadway. Officers stopped their vehicle and rendered aid to Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson did suffer a head injury and was transported to Kaiser Permanente as a local and will be admitted for treatment of that injury that we believe he sustained as a result of striking his head on the ground. There are no community or other members injured during this event. Force Investigation Division will be conducting this investigation as to the actions of the officers and everyone involved. Finally, yesterday morning, also at about 10 o'clock, Newton uniformed patrol officers were driving in the 1100 block of Pico Boulevard, and they observed what was believed to be a stranded motorist. When the officers stopped and exited their vehicle to assist, they observed that there was a dispute going on between parties. While attempting to separate the individuals and de-escalate the situation, one officer was bitten from behind by two pit bulls, and an officer-involved shooting occurred. Both dogs were struck by gunfire and retreated underneath the motorhome. Los Angeles City Animal Control officers responded to the scene and ultimately were able to secure the dogs and remove them from the location. The owner of the dogs were later determined to be one of the parties that was involved in the dispute and resided with the dogs in the motorhome. Unbeknownst to the officers, these two dogs were responsible for attacking a female the night before, in which that instance she sustained serious bodily injuries. Newton area detectives are going to continue their investigation of this incident. The injured officer was transported to a nearby hospital where they were treated for multiple dog bites and later released. No other community members or officers were injured. And again, Force Investigations will investigate the circumstances of that, and that investigation and my recommendations will be brought forward to this board. With these recent reports, that now constitutes 23 officer-involved shootings year-to-date versus 26 last year, and our four-year average is just over 22. There have been 12 fatal officer-involved shootings this year. Last year, that number was 12. Our four-year average is 9. In regards to our crime picture, we continue to see a reduction in violent crime in all categories, with a 24% reduction in homicides. That's 69 fewer homicide victims this year versus last. And looking at the nature of the individuals that account for this reduction, primarily it's in the area of persons who have been previously identified as experiencing homelessness. 40 of those 69 numbers make up 40 fewer victims that are of a homicide that were experiencing homelessness, which I think is a substantial achievement and also reflective of an overall reduction in violent crime involving individuals identified as experiencing homelessness. In regards to our property crime, our challenge remains in the personal theft arena, with an overall property crime increase of 1.3%. There's just under 1,000 additional property crimes. Overall, the Part 1 crime for Los Angeles, as of this past Saturday, including violent and property crime combined, is just under a 1% reduction. In regards to the attributes of a report this weekend of yet another smash and grab robbery that occurred at a mall, this one in the San Fernando Valley, I want to report that the instance that occurred at approximately 11 o'clock on Sunday morning in the Northridge Mall at Macy's, that the organization was able to respond with an organized retail theft task force And last night, one of the individuals we believe responsible was taken into custody. We also believe this individual is responsible for a number of other similar type occasions of these smash and grab type robberies. Since the inception of this task force, we now have had 21 arrests. They have investigated more than 93 of these various incidences, and they have a number of other individuals that we believe we've now identified, and we'll be working with the district attorney or the California Attorney General or the U.S. Attorney as appropriate for filing decisions. Finally, in regards to our personnel statistics, our staffing as of the 26th of August is at 8,959. That's a reduction of 52 sworn personnel since my last report. Additionally, we have 2,630 sworn professionals. That's an increase of 9 since my last report. Both of these staffing levels are still well below our authorized strength. We are well over 500 fewer personnel that we have the ability, but are lacking candidates, qualified candidates in which to hire. I am happy to report, though, that talking with Captain Patello in our Recruitment and Employment Division, we have seen a recent increase in online applications and those interested in joining the department in our sworn positions, which I'm encouraged by. That concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Chief. I'll reserve my comments and questions till the end, and I'll go to Commissioner Kalanche. But before I do, I'm going to ask this gentleman with the puppet to hold the puppet. It is obstructing the view of our Zoom audience. This is your first and last warning regarding the puppet. Commissioner Kalanche.
At this moment, I don't have
Thank you. Commissioner Briggs.
Thank you, President Suthers. Chief, let me start with the last item that you discussed, which is the staffing levels. If I heard you correctly, it was 8,959 that we currently have of sworn officers. I'm concerned that the department is rapidly approaching a number where we will not be able to handle the task that is before us, which is to keep the citizens of Los Angeles safe. We're well below the 9,000 mark now. It appears as if our attrition rate is greater than our recruitment rate. And I guess the question to you is, how do we stem the flow, if possible? Is there any possibility? I know that this is a national problem, but I'm more concerned with Los Angeles at present.
So thank you, and I share with you in that this is one of our most critical strategies this year is rebuilding this organization as we move to continue to work on the safety of our communities. And I'm encouraged by that we share that same initiative, that same prioritization by Mayor Bass and the majority of our city council. And it's reflective in the budget that has provided for a record hiring of sworn and civilian professionals, as well as in the most recent multi-year contract, a 4-year contract, which, as I discussed on Saturday before the delegates, is a record historic number when you look at the wages and benefits and the improvement to bring this organization closer to parity with other major cities, certainly parity with other major cities, but even closer to parity with the smaller agencies, which oftentimes have attracted our officers away from this department with the promise of higher compensation or work environments that are closer to home. The multi-year contract, I believe, will help retain individuals that were telling me personally, as well as others within the organization, that absent such a contract, that they were contemplating going to other agencies. So I think that will stem and slow the practice of the last 3 years, which has had about 250 people a year leave the organization early each year that would otherwise be with us today. And so I think that's work and that's investment. I think as those members see also the commitment to rebuild this organization, they're recognizing that will help alleviate some of the workload and some of the inequities where officers today are feeling overwhelmed. And they are feeling that they are being asked to do too much with too little. Our work will continue as an organization and leadership to identify tasks and responsibilities that we can offload. We are always encouraged by the city's efforts, our leaders, to find alternatives to policing, alternative means in which to go out and provide important public service that don't require public safety personnel. Secondly, we're looking internally. For instance, Chief Chow has been working with a group of community advocates to develop an online reporting for hate instances, which is I reported to you earlier. That is just one of the initiatives that presently requires a supervisor and a unit to respond to the location where that is being reported, to conduct an investigation that many times is a relatively short investigation based on the information that's available. It has resulted in community members not calling because of delay in service to have those units respond, and it's obligated those units still to be dispatched because of desire that we could earlier afford, which is to demonstrate the importance of reporting hate crimes and that our personal attention would be there. So working internally on right-sizing what we're asking our officers to do while working to attract and maintain a workforce. We have before public safety this week a Los Angeles Police Foundation grant that this commission earlier approved in excess of $1 million to help improve our marketing and outreach to communities. The earlier work has paid dividends, working with major shopping centers and working with resources the city had within itself has increased the marketing signature that we're hiring, and this is an organization that welcomes and encourages people to consider for the opportunities that we offer. So I do believe that that full spectrum approach is helping. And then lastly, when I spoke with our rank and file, I spoke about the importance that our best recruiters are in our room, the people in which we work with and work alongside, and recognizing that while we have challenges with our equipment, with our facilities, with the technology, with our efforts of right-sizing the tasks that we're asking them to do, that we're working on each of those. And in fact, in regards to facilities and equipment, that's been a particular focus by Commission President Suthers and was expressed explicitly on Saturday by Mayor Bass when she spoke with them. So, and what I got from that meeting was officers recognizing that they're being heard, they're being listened to, and I believe their commitment also will help attract and retain individuals to this organization.
Thank you, Chief. Last question. You mentioned earlier at the U.S. Conference of Mayors that there was a discussion of ghost guns. This is obviously a national problem, but again, reducing it to the city of Los Angeles, what can the department do in terms of advocating and or lobbying either the White House, U.S. Congress, our state legislature to prohibit the transportation of the parts that I understand flow into our city that allow for folks to just put these guns together?
So thank you. I want to thank our city attorney who pursued legislation against the Polymer 80 company and got a record $4 million settlement and a prohibition for them, for their activities of selling these parts or marketing those parts to the entire state of California. The work that she achieved with that, we are now seeing a reduction in the availability of those parts. So steps have been taken. I think those steps are incrementally going to take effect, but have a positive impact. However, I think a greater issue, and when I spoke about at the U.S. Conference of Mayors, was that in part of their agenda was continuing to ask the White House and Congress to reinstate the assault weapons ban, to ban high-capacity magazines, and to do universal background checks. That those three items would have, I believe, a significant impact on the safety of all of Americans from gun violence.
Thank you, Chief. No further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Briggs. Vice President Shields.
Thank you, President Suthers. Thank you, Chief, for the report, and thank you for highlighting the fact that this commission reviews all uses of force by law enforcement, including those that involve the shooting of animals. One question that I have is just from the last time we met here, there was the discussion about the conduct at the Mission Division involving the gang unit being disbanded. and the concerning conduct that the individuals were turning off their body-worn videos and conducting stops. And I wanted to know whether there's been any additional investigations or measures taken by the department to ensure this is not something occurring in any other division.
Yes, thank you. There is a task force of some 8 investigators that continue to conduct interviews of those that were assigned to that unit, and that will include supervision, and to understand the frequency in which an undocumented stop occurred, or body-worn video protocols were not followed as required. That will also include reviewing arrests and other enforcement actions that those individuals were involved in to ensure their constitutionality and ensure that they were appropriate. The actions of looking beyond has been a matter of us looking back to what our ongoing policies and procedures are, to inspecting what an officer completes each day as they go about their work, which is called a computer-aided dispatch summary. It's essentially a log of all of their activities. And accompanying that is then a digital trail of body-worn video as well as digital in-car video. And for more than 2 years, the department has had monthly inspections conducted outside of the area by inspection units at each of the 4 geographic bureaus and overseen by the Office of Operations to identify any anomalies and to investigate those anomalies. And when mistakes have been made or errors or a shortfall by the officer, to take corrective action and to document that. We recently reviewed that entire process and found that it was in place, and it is effective in identifying instances where officers have a late activation or early deactivation or haven't properly documented on their CAD the circumstances of the stop or the why those shortfalls occurred. In addition to that, we recently audited and inspected to ensure, again, compliance with each area, each day. Supervisors are required to review the previous day's CAD summaries by the officers that were worked. They're required to review the log to ensure that if they're, and to review the completion of what's called a field data capture report, which is essentially the gender, race, reason, purpose of the stop, outcome of the stop. That's a separate report in addition to the CAD summary. It's to ensure that both those reports were completed as required. And again, this last week since we last met, a inspection was done, a spot inspection was done, and then a follow-up inspection with across the 21 areas, and we found that the systems were in place. We also, however, identified with last Friday, I had a conference call with the 4 geographic bureau chiefs, because while we found the systems were in place, we wanted to stress that it was then upon the supervisor who noted the anomaly and the area and patrol commanding officer to ensure that the underlying basis for that anomaly was understood. And there are times in which officers are going to make mistakes. There's times in which officers are going to be in a tactical situation and may have a late activation. But that local station is to investigate that and determine whether or not those are the circumstances or there's evidence of a pattern or habit of the officer not complying with these standards. These standards are unbending. I've also communicated that personally with my own messaging to the organization, as well as through a communication with every gang officer in the organization through a series of meetings, and also communications with our commanding officers to go through our supervisors. So these are efforts to both detect but also deter instances in which people believe that there's some weakness in the system from its ability to identify and discover such anomalies that we've seen and now experienced. I want to remind the public that this was brought to the department as a single incident in which a community member alleged that they were stopped without reason and their vehicle was searched without cause. And the organization has taken that single instance and we're built to where we're at today. And we will continue that, because it's not a matter of avoiding something. If this problem is deeper or wider, then that's what we're committed to finding out. But at the same time, I do believe, as I've expressed, that these inspections to date have demonstrated that the inspection processes are in place and that they're working and that and that our men and women are following the high expectations that we have. Lastly, we also continue to work to research what are additional ways in which we can identify the systems that are involved here, because they're disparate systems and they don't talk with one another. Chief John McMahon, our Chief Information Officer, his team is working on and upgrading and modernizing our record management system, which will address the fact that these disparate systems today will, by the first quarter of this next year, with the delivery of this new system, all be integrated. So if there's an absence or a shortfall in one aspect, it'll flag, if you will, and not require what is currently a manual process of reviewing. On average, the department deploys anywhere between 700 and 800 units a day. And so one could see out of the tens of thousands of transactions that finding an anomaly currently is a labor-intensive manual process. We do intend, with the modernization, which was planned well in advance of this discrepancy, to improve and simplify. We also believe that that will simplify the officers' obligations and the amount of time it takes for them to complete the needed documentation in these various systems.
Thank you, Chief. And it's, good to know that, systems are in place and they're being followed, and that the auditing is showing that these are in place. My only concern is just if these systems have already been in place, but there's ways for people to get around the auditing by not documenting anything. I think the department needs to look into additional ways, as you've mentioned, of marrying up the systems so that there's a better way to audit. And so I appreciate that there are additional steps that the department is taking, not just relying on the existing audit
No,
process.
absolutely. In the absence of where I know the technology path is going, I would share that same concern with you. But I am confident that the technology upgrade that's already been envisioned is now rolling. I got a briefing just yesterday as to the progress of actually implementing that new system by the first quarter of this coming year. I'm confident that will help strengthen this even more.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Vice President Shields. Commissioner Garcia, any questions or comments?
No questions. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Chief, I'd like to pivot back to Vice President Shields' comments on the body-worn video and understand that these processes have been in place and that they seem to be adequate, but I do look forward to the top 5 comparative analysis, the top 5 agencies in the country, to see what their body-worn video policies look like, to see if we stack up. I'd like to hope that we are leading in terms of how those policies and procedures go, but I'm looking forward to that because we may want to revise our auditing process. The other thing I'd like to ask for is, you've given a retail theft update. Is there anything else with regards to community outreach or any other efforts that we're engaging in that perhaps people should know about?
Well, we are working, first of all, let me talk about the top 5. We'll have that report to you in the next 45 days. And our organized retail theft task force efforts are also working with retailers, both mom and pop up through the major organizations, to identify practices that they can operate at a division at their store level to minimize the risk of these type of thefts and to ensure the safety of their personnel. As for the community members, our ongoing communication is do not feed this industry by buying materials off of vendors or other businesses. The secondhand business in our country today is profiting by these individuals that are committing these thefts and robberies and feeding them with merchandise at a very high discounted rate. And those merchants are then profiting from that. They share in the responsibility for the terror and the fear that are in the shopping public, as well as in the viability of these merchants remaining in our community and providing vital services and by being able to operate in a manner that doesn't suffer these types of losses. Many times the margins for many of these businesses are well below a single digit. And these types of thefts, I'm not talking, certainly the hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars that we've seen on these high-end stores, but this goes all the way down to local stores and individual convenience marks that are also suffering from these type of thefts.
Okay, thank you. Two other items I'd just like to comment on: the CPAB system, the Community Police Advisory Board units that are across the city. I went to a very good conversation last night of the Southwest CPAB. Community members were there. It was a very full room. There were introductions and, I should say, reports by the individual senior lead officers to their respective areas within the division. A very constructive conversation with the community on everything from recruiting to officer wellness to technology. What can they do to help? They had some very interesting ideas. It was just a really good conversation, and before we knew it, the time, 90 minutes, had gone by very quickly. So I'll be attending others in the next couple of weeks, as well as Commissioner Shields. I know she's going to be going, and I just want to tell you that that system seems to be an opportunity for us to go out in the community, hear from people firsthand. They are direct, and they do have some ideas, and they do have some really good recommendations. I'd just like to commend you on those programs.
Well, I'm proud of our leadership team that recognizes these are valuable exchanges and information and perspective that we should and do welcome.
And lastly, I'm glad you could make it to Pastor Boyd's retirement. He is an icon. I just want to commend him and the First AME Church. They've been engaged with both this police department and other public safety and homeland security efforts in the area on courses, providing his church to give courses on de-escalation and crisis management for law enforcement. We've hosted a number of protecting houses of worship and addressing hate crimes in his church, and I'm hoping that'll continue with his successor. Coincidentally, he happens to be a fraternity brother of mine, as well as Commissioner Briggs, so I know him well, and I'm glad you could make it to his retirement.
Absolutely, it was an honor to be there.
Can I
Yes,
add a quick
absolutely.
question? Thank you. Chief, in response to, or in addition to Commissioner Briggs' question around recruitment, I have a thought, something for you to consider for either personnel department or even our recruitment efforts. It seems that there isn't any combined recruitment or application process between, or for law enforcement, for police and fire. And we know that fire department has way less positions. So I'm wondering if it's a conversation we can have with personnel department where if you apply for one, you can check off both and go through a parallel process. Because I think those positions attract a similar type of potential employee. So I'm just wondering, it's a thought. I mean, if I was doing recruitment, I mean, that's a pool that at a community college, some of the students may take like a program that gets them either into fire or police.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering, those that don't get into fire, if they would consider police.
I think it's worth exploring again. We have had earlier efforts to, because of the applicant flows within the fire department were so much greater.
Yes.
And their hiring portal was so much smaller as far as the thread of
Yes.
the needle.
That's what I was thinking.
And we have strived to get access to that. I think with the new AGM that's there, I look forward to working and them sharing, if you will, that information so that if there's a checkbox on the application or not, that at least it's an interest pool
Yeah.
that we can do outreach to and engage. Secondly, as part of Mayor Bass's, one of the tasks and asks that she had of us, of myself, was for us to develop a strategic plan to outreach communities that are less than seen as traditional applicant pools. And so that's currently something that, again, Captain Portello, under the leadership of Chief Choi, are developing to identify those pools, nursing, teaching, vocational positions that would be, whether at job centers or schools, would be an opportunity for us to visit and say, have you considered a plan B, an alternative to perhaps what you thought you might start it off with one, but you end up with what would be a very rewarding career. So we will continue. We've got to reach beyond just our traditional groups.
And streamline. So if someone's applying for fire department, that they have, eventually like would want a job, right? Whether they continue in pursuit of fire, fire department here or another department, but if there's a pool that it's just, it's streamlined so they can check off both. Just a thought. Of
Thank you.
potential, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, President Suthers.
Thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item number 2, public comment. Madam Secretary, please call the first speaker.
Okay, first, we have Mr. Herman.
Can we start the clock?
Ignorance. Why are you so angry with Mr. Herman? All he's doing is bringing me to the meeting, you bunch of bitches. So we heard the rules of decorum last couple of times regarding the enforcement that violate the First Amendment, right, everybody? Because they contain provisions which constitute impermissible prior restraints. Just like when you told the service dog, ruff, 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 service dog, please come down. That's your first warning. What a bunch of shit. You know, the terms are vague and lack adequate standards or the guidelines for enforcement, city officials, jackass. But intent to censor the plaintiff, Herman, aka D, Snoop double D-O-G-G-Y, me, you. It sounds very funny back there. I'm glad you're interested in this topic. But the intent to prevent him from exercising his free speech, right of assembly, and right to due process with malice oppression and which intent thereby depriving the nigger of his legal constitutional right or otherwise causing injury for which punitive damage and explanatory damages. Now let me go into the content he read into the record. Lawless action, U.S. 395, 444, 1969. Would you like to read it into the record, Herman?
No.
Okay, I'll read it. This is what we're going to do to the niggers. A dirty nigger. Send the Jews back to Israel. Let's give them back
Mr.
to
President,
the
this is
dark
off topic.
Sir, I am reciting U.S. 395
Madam
under
Secretary,
non-agenda
can you hold
public
the clock for a
comment.
moment? Sir, I have a question for you.
444-1969.
When you use that term, are you referring to me or all the black people in this room?
Sir, I believe the puppet was referring to Brandon versus Ohio,
Okay.
U.S. 395, opinion of the courts, motherfuckers.
Madam Speaker.
That's all it is. That's all it is, motherfucker. That's all it's gonna be like, nigga. This nigga is talking about the truth about Brandenburg versus Ohio, U.S. 395, 444, 1969. It's content by the courts. It's not impermissible. So cut your shit out, bro. Cut your shit out, bro. You're interrupting my public comment, bro. You started the shit by asking me what and I'm telling you, save America, save America. Brandenburg versus Ohio, dumb Biden, your 46th fucking president has fucked this world up for all of us. Here's my
Your time has expired.
Next, we have Andrew Graebner.
All right. I will speak on all items.
Okay, 3 minutes.
So starting off with the chief's report should be limited to 3 minutes at every meeting. if the chief's report exceeds 3 minutes, you should, either cut off the chief's time or we should be allowed to match however long he takes. If the,
Madam
and regardless
Secretary,
of,
hold the clock. Sit. Okay. Madam Secretary, go ahead.
I'm not the secretary, but yeah, the, chief's report should be 3 minutes only. So I think that's a reasonable amount of time for him. If it's a reasonable amount of time for us, it's more than a reasonable amount of time for him. So, and you should hear from everyone, both in person and on the phone. I see that the cop shot a dog, last week, and you know, if you have, I've had dogs for a long time. I have a dog, and I had a dog before the current one. And usually the dogs attack when the dog feels threatened. And I wonder if it's because the cops always go into every situation really aggressive, really loud, really, you know, over the top. That probably frightened the dog. And then, of course, it was the cop's natural response was to shoot the dog. So, you know, I don't think that's a reasonable response to a dog approaching you. So, yeah. All right, let's see, the consent agenda. We have the entire Metro contract, it looks like, on the consent agenda. I'm not really sure that's a non-controversial routine item. But yeah, get the cops off Metro. They're not even in compliance with their own contract on Metro. So you need to figure that out. Oh, I forgot with the chief's report. It's your first day and you don't have any questions for the chief, Fabian? Come on. And then we have fuck the rewards, just giving money to snitches, reject all the donations. You know, why does the LAPD have any concert bans? You know, more money for holiday parties, and a reminder that the LA Police Foundation is the Los Angeles equivalent of the institution that's funding Cop City in Atlanta. Let's see. Get rid of the tasers. And yeah, again, it seems like, you know, why are you targeting someone just for having to bring his baby to the police commission meetings? Like, sometimes you need to walk around and, you know, such, but you target him because you don't like him, and, you know, you need to stop doing that. So sometimes if you schedule the meetings in the, you know.
Okay,
Thank you,
thank
Madam
you.
Secretary. Next speaker, please.
Next, we have Mike Greenspan. Okay, I don't think he's in the room. Move on to Wayne Spindler.
Oh, you assholes. Okay. So let's see here. You got smash and grab robbers and you can't find them. Really? Come on there, Agent Errol. Special Agent Errol. You can't find them? That's amazing, man. All of those HD cameras, you can't zoom down in the front and get the VIN of the fucking cars. You know how much money they spend on security? You can find these people. You don't want to find these people. How come you don't want to find these people? What happened? Did some of your informants decide to get a little profit motive going, huh? See, that's what happens, right? You're going to find out that some of these people are paid government informants, right? That's the only fucking reason, or they'd be behind bars right now today, right? So now we got nobody here of the Caucasian persuasion on this commission. Let's give Karen Batts a hand. This is ethnic cleansing at its best. This is good ethnic cleansing. Yes, we don't want to have anybody Jewish, anybody white, anybody Caucasian, anybody British, anybody white. We cannot have anybody like that. Why? Because it's ethnic cleansing. So now you have no excuse no more. You got two Latinos. You have the two bald-headed Property Brothers. You know, you look just like the Property Brothers, except you're black and you got no fucking talent. Other than that, you look like twins. And then we got the oddball. No, she's white. She's going to say she's Caucasian. No, she's Middle Eastern. But see, then, later on, she's going to go, when Trump gets back into office,
No, I'm white. Look at my census. I put down I'm Caucasian.
right? Because we know that Iranians are Caucasians. No, they're Asians. No, they're that. So you can be what you want to be, right? Then you got the guy from Homeboy. What you gonna do? You gonna cure and correct this shit? Yeah, man. I'm gonna go and get all those gang members' records expunged, man. I'm gonna get a 17B motion, yo. All motherfucking felonies gonna be reduced to misdemeanors. Because that's why I'm on the commission. I promised the Father Flanagan to go get all those misdemeanors down to infractions, right? That's why you're here. But you gotta go to my buddy, my district attorney buddy, George Gascon, to do it. It's all right. At the end of the month, I got good news. I'm trying to go and get a couple of felonies down to misdemeanors. I'll let you know how it goes, right? See that? So finally, there's no Steve Soberoff. I was going to play Lily Allen's favorite video, Fuck You Very Much. Fuck you very much, Steve. I love you.
Next, we have Betty Lay.
Good morning.
Good morning. What items would you like to speak on?
All of them, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
First off, I'd like to show my support for Chief Moore's Chief's report. And I support agenda items 3C, 3D, 3E. Also, I don't understand all this profanity in public comment, especially when there's a child in the room. I think some of these people need to put on their big boy pants and act respectful. With that, I also am hoping that Dr. Southerns will be available October 11th, as we talked about. And with that, I support LAPD and I yield the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Lloyd Flores. I think that says Flores. Lord Flores.
Record. I come in all power and authority and dominion over Babylon the Great that has fallen this day, has fallen to his death because of the fact that I'm the messenger of the covenant of Almighty God as his very elect, as himself. So as I speak today, I would like you to hear and understand the judgment of this city, but have been called to the attention of the corruption and the injustice that has been done to the people the police department is supposed to protect and serve, not be trained to kill, to shoot with excessive deadly force. Do I make myself clear? As the Alpha and the Omega. Thank you. Revelations 19. Now the earth was corrupt in the great sight and was full of violence. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all people on the earth have corrupted their ways. So God called Noah, which I'm Noah, Jesus, still alive by faith. I'm going to put an end to all people and destroy the whole earth, especially Babylon the Great, which is considered Sodom and Gomorrah. So let me get back to the part where I came here on behalf of Billy. There was a LAPD officer involved shooting, for the record, at the Ford Hotel. I was living there at the time, still being a resident, but being homeless for 9 years as of 2023 for the injustice, corruption of the homeless society as well, for helping homeless. They're nothing but liars and injustice being done. So I'm here basically for the delay of the judgment. So if I were you, I would hear and understand the word of God and do not play or try to mock me because I'm not a joke. I'm here to give you the message and you to understand and obey. So there was a shooting. Billy was shot that I believe 4 times. A 911 call was called in. So being that said, I heard 6 more shots, then I heard 10. And then we had officers, command station, come out, and the detectives come with the thing like shoot number 4, like putting a movie, celebrating a man's death. That's insane. I'm here as a judge. You are out of order. Out of order, thus saith the Lord of hosts. You do not celebrate people's death at all. They even partied. They celebrated. They had pizza. They had water. I witnessed everything from the 3rd floor of the building of the Ford Hotel. Billy was not just an angel of the Lord. He was a leader, just like I am the leader of the army of Israel and the nation of Israel. And he was murdered.
Thank you, ma'am.
Next, we have Steve Rogers.
Good morning.
Good morning. What items would you like to speak on?
All items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
First, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence for all the victims of 9/11. All the victims, moment of silence, please. Thank you. And especially for the families and the people that continue to suffer from that day 22 years ago. Where should I start? U.S. Conference of Mayors on the ghost gun issue. Guns generally are not the problem. A gun has never actually shot someone without it being used by a person to pull the trigger. So let's not vilify guns. When you're talking about violence, that's the issue, is violence. People are arrested for violent crime. Unfortunately, and many times, they're not being prosecuted and incarcerated as they should be. So you have to have consequences for crime. And otherwise, as I said before, you get more crime. That's very basic. So let's focus on the individual offenders, the people who commit crimes, and not the gun itself. There are many responsible gun owners. The Second Amendment is enshrined in our Constitution as a God-given right. And let's try to empower people to protect themselves because, quite frankly, you can't depend on the police department, through no fault of their own, to protect you, okay? You have to rely on yourself. That's self-reliance. I'm glad that the chief went to the Police Protective League conference. I'm sure he heard some interesting things. And I hope that the police commissioners, especially the ones who are newer, go to roll calls, go to a Police Protective League monthly meeting and talk to the officers, and then have a closed roll call where the captain's not there or the supervisors and speak to the officers directly and listen to what they're saying. You're right, they are the best recruiters, but would the average officer recommend the LAPD today? Probably not. You need to do away with the COVID-19 mandate for recruits. Obviously, the numbers are seriously low, as was read today, and it is in a tailspin. The LAPD is in a tailspin, and you need to pull out of that tailspin and quickly. It's not about equipment and facilities, okay? The LAPD has always probably had not great equipment and facilities, but it had a certain esprit de corps, the best of the best. If you don't understand what I'm saying, watch Adam 12, the original, then the new Adam 12, then TJ Hooker. Okay, basically it's a culture, and you have to have a culture that is proud. Enforce 403 PC at the meetings, President Suthers. Do what needs to be done. People have the right to speak, but they don't have the right to speak past 3 minutes and disrupt. We need an arrest for that, not just warnings. Thank you.
Next, we have Jonathan Foster.
Hi, Jonathan Foster. I'm going over what I went over 2 weeks ago. Here it is, Chief. From 2015, I had this O'Callahan. It says that she was prosecuted. She hit Alicia Thomas in the face. Last week, I said her mom's name, Sandra, but it was actually Alicia Thomas, and she was hit in the face. And what was important to me was that it said that she could be seen smoking a cigarette on the street after she assaulted her, kicked her in the crotch and all this kind of stuff, and struck her in the throat with an open hand, and she died. And it says over here, this is what I didn't get to last week, it should be clear to everyone that the LAPD and the criminal justice system will hold officers accountable for their actions when they operate outside the law. LAPD Chief Illuminati Beck. That's what he said. And why didn't that happen to the officers that shot Gresario Mack? Why did it just happen to Alicia Thomas? It should have happened to the officers that shot Gresario Mack on the ground, which is out of policy, and then he died. That's a oopum, out of policy murder. He didn't get prosecuted because of Stroganoff. So just before the call starting, she needs a cigarette. Callahan needs a cigarette. This happens with bathroom too. All of a sudden the bladder's full. During the rest, she gets high blood pressure, high heart rate, and the brain chemistry is screaming, "I need a cigarette!" And she did get her cigarette. All officers in occurrences of death need a blood test. And then I wonder, why did she let herself do this, knowing she's on camera? She's a Marine, 18-year excellent service on the LAPD. 18 years. This officer was excellent. And then she lost her pension, and she didn't get the support she needed, and life choices. She's addicted to cigarettes. How many drug addicts are on the force? That's what I want to know. And then it goes back into the concept I was talking about, brain chemistry and suicide and brain chemistry with the sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation is a silent killer, stealth manipulator, right? What'd you say?
Attempting to redirect this organization, perhaps this commission, from its true pursuit.
No. What Chief Charlie Beck said is what's supposed to happen. That's what they're supposed to do, and Stroganoff did not do this. How about this one from last time?
Either replica or imitation firearms. Is there any steps being taken to identify where these items are coming from?
Yeah, so let's talk about this part. Let's talk about this. What do you suggest on bike parts, vape pens, cell phones, hand casts, kids' toy Tonka trucks, or fake knives? Do you ever ask where fake knives come from? Where did the fake knives, where's all this fake stuff come from? They've shot these people with everything I just listed off.
Next, we have caller ending 1264. Caller ending 1264, you're on.
Hello?
Oh, hi, what items would you
Hello?
like to speak on?
Yeah, all items.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Yeah, I'm over here in CD7 Foothill Division, and we have officers that do vice, and we have officers that do gang units, and we have community police officers, and I'm not sure what they do, and because we have so many small crimes and misdemeanors going on all over our residential area, and it makes it very difficult to live a good quality of life. And we have a lot of kids that are watching this and looking at this, and they're imitating what they see these gang members do. They totally disrespect everybody and disrespect authority. So the younger kids are doing this, and they're imitating their role models. And I mean, it's just really gotten out of control. I was at the library in Pacoima the other day, and you had somebody that was vaping inside the library. The librarian asked him to please leave and to stop doing that. And he says, "No, I'm not leaving. I'm going to be back tomorrow." And they graffitied the whole bathroom. and the other kids are looking at this and they're saying there is no authority. We have totally lost all control of the situation here in our San Fernando Valley. I mean, it is really a bad situation. And you were talking about hate crimes. In my community, most of the people are Hispanic, and most of the people who get shot or get attacked or have something terrible happen to them violently are of the same color and being done by the people of the same color. So, I mean, there are hate crimes against people that are the same color in my community. I mean, the gangs, I guess the gangs hate people that look like them, but they seem to be under a different brand, I guess. So we really need to start concentrating on these things where people come in and do illegal activity. And I say, illegal vending is illegal activity, but you guys want to make it you got to make it seem like it's not that bad, but it is. We have no idea. These people, we have no idea where they're coming from. They're not from our community. They just come in and they just put things on our sidewalk and block our sidewalks. Gang members frequent these illegal vendors because it is illegal. Of course, they're involved in illegal activity. So everything perpetuates itself. So, I mean, I don't know what the plan is. I mean, we have to have a plan to do something about this. And Foothill doesn't seem to have a plan because they don't seem to be working with the community.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have the Red Chief.
Very good, very good. My name is the Red Chief Hunt. Michael Moore, I just explained the situation to you. They got you in trouble in 2007 when you was chief of police, deputy chief over at the West Bureau. But you told me that your guys would arrest somebody for a 35-cent ticket on the Metro and waste $10,000 on a $35 ticket, which is unconstitutional. Oakland versus the state of California. You should read the citation. If you don't listen to me, and a federal judge came back and agreed with what I said, more than twice, Hunt versus the city of Los Angeles, the right to due process. I went to federal court, but you can't treat a civil citation criminally. And this is where you're wrong at. You have to listen to what the public is saying. This is why you don't have participation in all the neighborhoods, where I live. City council or neighborhood council is down because nobody believes in you guys, because you guys don't listen to what the people are saying until somebody have to come in here and tell you. The city attorney on many different occasions has challenged me, and I got a high school education, but how many city attorneys asked you got? And I did the paperwork myself. You really ought to listen to what people are saying. Those two citations, Hunt versus the city of Los Angeles, just didn't come about because I had to do the paperwork myself. Now, if I have to go get Stephen Rohde and he jumps on board, then you guys are going to spend another $2 or $3 million. Now the court cost is $1.5 million to try these cases. And that ain't no small piece of change. But you guys got $3 billion, but you guys are not investing in the community or doing anything that the community says. Listen to what I'm saying. Policing, we go back to birdseed arrests, and that just didn't make any sense. And this is what you're getting ready to do at Metro. That doesn't make any sense. I watched a guy who wasn't doing anything criminally get thrown out to transit. I don't care whether he have a tag. If he's minding his own business, he's minding his own business. But what I'm telling you is the police are to handle criminal activities, not civil activities. You got to listen to what I'm saying, because if you read the citation and the city attorney reads the citation to you, you understand what I'm saying. You guys lost that, man, and the state, doesn't vary. Case law is case law. Listen to what I'm saying. The right to due process. The Honorable Ninth Circuit Red Chief Hunt, who has done it and don't mind doing it again. Listen to what I'm saying. You should respect me as a dignitary, sir.
Next, we have Jamie on Zoom.
Hi, all items.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Okay. First of all, if you can hear background noise, it's because I'm running around between one of the 1 billion meetings that the city and county flagrantly conspired to schedule at the same fucking time in the middle of the school and work day. Move this meeting to the night or the weekend and move it out of LAPD headquarters. Anyway, Commissioner Shields, at the last session, you gave someone a warning for having a sign with a swastika on it. First of all, the fact that I have to be grateful for that is disgusting, and it shows how fucking low the bar is for basic human, or at least human adjacent behavior of commissioners when they're in this room. Second of all, I have to say that I ultimately find your willingness to issue that warning to be frightening. And that's because it suggests that you, Shields, do personally have the capacity to identify instances of racially motivated hatred. Which begs the question, how is it then possible that you authorize and encourage the anti-Black hatred that is the ideological and practical foundation of policing? Every modern day police force is effectively a slave patrol. And even if you are willing to deny that fact, which is unassailable from any perspective that takes into account data, history, and basic logic, even if you're willing to deny that anti-Black hatred is the only reason policing began and developed in the way that it has, why is it so relatively important to you, Shields, as a member of an ethics committee, to preserve only the decorum and respectful atmosphere of this space we're in together by ridding it of symbols you deem to be dangerous? But on the other hand, you're complacent with authorizing money for weapons that have no purpose other than to murder people, and pit bulls apparently. Jesus fucking Christ. Where exactly is the disconnect in your mind? And by the way, we know that the fuckery that you get up to on this board, Shields, is all the same bullshit that you've been working on at Jones Day, which has been working to defend and fund Cop City since day one. Well, as protesters in Atlanta and around the country and world have made it very fucking clear to you and your cronies, Cop City is morally indefensible. And the backlash to the folks protesting it isn't even legally defensible. The 61 people who've been hit by the Georgia AG with RICO charges are so obviously innocent. The racketeering charges deemed that acts like passing out flyers are criminal when they're transparently just the exercise of First Amendment rights. Jones Day and the other bullshit firms standing by Cop City are standing by a proposed factory of racial hate, racial terror, and frankly, proposed genocide. We know that Cop City cannot be defended, and neither can the actions of this board. Every single donation and city allocation you accept results in more terror and murder. And until you motherfuckers either hold LAPD accountable or quit, you can look forward to us making the absurd effort that it takes us to attend these meetings in order to tell you to eat shit, disarm all police, and disband all police forces. Complete nationwide abolition is the only way to safety, and there's no reason that it shouldn't begin here in LA and extend to Georgia and beyond. Once again, eat shit. I'll yield the rest of my time.
Okay, next we have Hamid Khan.
Every time we come to this meeting, I'm reminded of my post-colonial Pakistan in a Jesuit school where, the teacher would come in with a cane in his hand, and just as Errol Southers starts the meeting with, just stay put, be silent, and submit to the police state. And that's what we were talking about. One of the terms that got used around the mission division's body camera bullshit was the system is in place, right? So let's look at what we even know. Right, exactly, because the system is in place and it works. It's a system of lies, conspiracies, deception, planting false evidence, murders, mayhem, trauma, torture, and on and on. But let's even look at some of the other events during the last 10 years, right? So the dash cameras, the digital in-car, video cams, were installed with a lot of pomp and show in 2012. By 2013, we've learned that 92 out of 300 patrol cars, the antennas were broken. Intentionally, by the cops, system was in place. 2015, 25,000 crime reports are misclassified, right? System is in place. 2018, hundreds of young people being put in chronic offender list with 0 points where the system was in place for 30 points, right? Remember that one? That was dismantled then? So the system has been in place. Very much so, and the system continues to be in place, which brings me to a couple other items too, that the system is in place where LAPD has its own discovery division to kind of just adhere to the laws of the state around California Public Records Act. But time after time, the claim of unusual circumstances, overly burdensome, and every time you submit. So we've had to go to court 11 times since 2016. 11 public records lawsuits that we have filed against the LAPD, and we have won 7, and we'll win the other 4 as well, right? So because the system is in place to completely reject this thing. Which lastly brings me to some of the stuff that we started our fights with around behavioral surveillance. And we've seen behavioral surveillance, what it does with the iWatch program, that it was the white neighborhoods, majority, and that's this guy's, the Inspector General's audits, which, by the way, where's the SAR audit? Since 2019, we haven't seen it in the fucking audit either. That all the majority reports of iWatch, See Something, Say Something, were coming from majority white neighborhoods. And when you look at the racial balance or who's going into these secret lists, it is non-white people. So now the same thing has been replicated by the LAUSD in their LASAR app, the Los Angeles School Anonymous Reporting Program, where now they're giving a tool to snitch on other youth, and this is the schooling of children going on. This was launched in 2023. That to snitch on behavioral surveillance. Remember,
Your time has expired. Madam Speaker, please call the next speaker.
Next, we have Gina.
talk about spreading the hate.
Gina, you're on.
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
I'd like to hear Hamid Khan finish his comment first, quite frankly. But I know you'll never do that because you're not interested in justice at all. I'd like to speak on all items. This meeting, this board is political theater, complete with paid agitators in the audience to discredit the public in public comment. If you think after attending this meeting year after year, this isn't made plainly obvious week after week, you are sadly mistaken. And I am telling you that more of the public agrees with this and knows this deeply, but of course cannot be here to tell you this because, as Jamie pointed out, you have this meeting at the most impossible of times. It is imperative that we are able to advocate for our government, to our politicians. We have to be in City Hall. We have to be at Board of Supervisors. So you purposely put your clown show political theater meeting at the same time as all these other very important meetings. And this political theater would be funny if it wasn't so fucking deadly. What you are doing here is scripting a show week after week to cover up the murder of Black, brown, and poor people in our city. You are putting together a script to cover up the oppression of Black, brown, and poor people in our city week after week. You are not the citizen's voice in policing affairs. We are the citizen's voice in policing affairs, and you will go to great lengths to belittle and discredit us in the media, in the press. I mean, we now have the sitting president of the police commission at a meeting in San Diego with a big LAPPL banner behind him. How in the hell are you even remotely, you're not even disguising yourself as oversight, much as racist Magoo never did. He was on record saying over and over again, of course he sides with the police. He sees what they go through. Policing in this town is nothing more than white supremacy. And you, this board, are the watchdogs of that white supremacy. And the sooner that you all step down and let us do something meaningful to actually have some oversight of police, the better off we'll all be. But we know that will never happen because you are millionaires and you are political appointees waiting for this to bolster you to your next position, whatever that may be. And in the meantime, our community members die. Our community members are terrorized, oppressed, run out of this town because of you, because of the 5 of you running cover for this police chief, this sitting police chief that has.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Matios Kidain.
Hi, speaking on all items. My name is Matias Kidane with the Stop LAPD Spine Coalition. Yeah, just some quick numbers about what we're talking about today. We're talking about 24 shootings, 16 people killed, and 2 pets. These are all individual tragedies, like we've heard from the friends and family of Billy Stribling, right, at the Ford Hotel, events that we're treating with levity. But there's a textbook policy for how the LAPD responds to these tragedies, right? And that's with reform that expands the LAPD budget, with reform that adds new toys to their arsenal. Last meeting, we heard Chief Moore talk about how, new tasers, new non-lethals would be the response to this continued killings and shootings by LAPD. And sure enough, on the agenda today, we're talking about a new taser with 10 prongs instead of 2. Now, we know that tasers aren't actually non-lethal, right? We've seen the killing of Keenan Anderson earlier this year. But it's worth noting the history of this response, right? With Eula Love in 1979, who was shot by LAPD for being unable to pay a power bill, right? The response to that was the implementation of the TASER program. And this company, TASER, now renamed Axon, they make a whole slew of toys for the LAPDs and other police departments. We've got the body-worn video. We've got evidence.com, right? This vast database. They're making a ton of money in response to tragedy. And it's not just something that happens, it's the playbook. Axon themselves announced a brand new toy in response to the Uvalde shooting, right? Where they announced a drone with tasers on it. And so that's what we see time and time again. Calls for training, calls for new toys to expand the LAPD budget and keep the violence going. And when that doesn't work, what do we hear? New narratives from the LAPD's ghost guns, right? We hear about smash and grab robberies, follow home robberies. And let's not forget that Walgreens' own CEO, James Cahoe, admitted last year that stories about smash and grab were exaggerated. They were fictitious. This is coming from somebody who was a party in spreading that narrative, right? But sure enough, even though that narrative has deflated now, we're seeing it stoked up again, that organized retail theft task force still exists. There's still demand for more policing. And on the subject of ghost guns, I don't understand how the LAPD can bring that up without acknowledging that, 44 firearms went missing from the LAPD's own store, right? So if we want to talk about dissemination of stolen weaponry, that's being practiced by the LAPD more than anybody else. Lastly, on this online reporting for hate instances, we as community members recognize that hate exists, anti-Blackness exists, anti-Semitism exists, misogyny, ableism. But we also recognize that when these institutions talk about hate, they're proxies for terrorism, for extremism, right? And we know that Dr. Suthers' own research, when he talks about hate, he's looking at Black Somali youth, right? That's who we're talking about. When we talk about hate and when we talk about displays of hate language, we know the LAPD is often bolstering thin blue line, right-wing rhetoric, right? So when we hear hate and when we hear the LAPD talking about addressing hate, we know it's just to target people critical of policing, right? That's always what hate means.
Thank you.
Next, we have Philip Tabby.
Good morning. All items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
I want to start with answering Commissioner Shields' question. You had asked about the body worn. Mike, I think you're lying about this. And Commissioner Shields, you should meet with Captain Smith. He's going to tell you all the loopholes. But Mike, 2 weeks ago, you made such a big deal about the body worn and you were going to punish people. But now that you own it, all of a sudden, everything's working okay. Well, Inspector General, I am officially asking for an independent audit of the patterns of the body worn. To Commissioner Garcia, welcome. This board had a turnover, so let me tell you a story. In January of 22, my community was shaken up by the removal of a well-loved senior lead officer. Letters from many different community members were sent to this commission, and we still speak about it today in these meetings. Soon after, our captain was downgraded and moved to 77th. All commissioners, please contact Captain Smith because there's a large amount of information you should know. We, the people, have done our own investigation. Captain Smith was removed for speaking truth to power. He spoke so loudly the FBI became involved. Soft on crime Monica Rodriguez has allegedly been involved and accused of impeding an investigation and much more. This wasn't the only time he has kept truth to his oath. Smith also reported on the body-worn situation at Mission Station and was demoted for bringing it up. That entire thing could have been avoided, Mike. He told you and Liz Rhodes. I said it on Tuesday, August 29th here, and it was in the LA Times on Thursday, August 31st. Mike, I'm reading the email sent to you and Liz Rhodes. All you're trying to do is cover it up. Commission, let me also tell you of another situation when Smith did not want to perjure himself. Instead, another captain did perjure himself on a federal moratorium against you. And what did you do, Mike? You demoted Smith and you promoted the other captain to commander. I have a new name for you, Mike. Chief More Cover-Up. Because every time we look, there's always more cover-up, isn't there? According to a lawsuit, Smith refused to sign a false declaration on a moratorium against the department from a federal judge. We deserve a chief with moral compass. Imagine if there was a chief just like you when you were cleaning up the Rampart scandal. One little complaint against you and you would have been gone. Imagine if Rafael Perez said, "Why are you looking at me funny? Do you think I smashed your honey?" You would be demoted and transferred. You do not back up your troops. You do not back up your command staff. You are a complete disgrace. Why don't you just go move to Tennessee and sip your bourbon? Because there are many holes in the department that need to be fixed. If you want to hire and retain officers, fire Chief Moore, fire Liz Rhodes, and God bless the LAPD.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Zach Sherwood.
The 45-minute period has expired. This will be the last speaker.
I'm a member of the public. I came and I submitted a call.
Madam Secretary, please start the clock. Sir, you have the floor.
Oh, you got to start my clock over. That's ridiculous. 6 seconds. We're going to have this. That's his. I took the time. Give it back to him. Dude. Start the clock over. I will take my extra 20 seconds at the end. On my way in, an officer held the door for me, which I didn't ask him to do, and I walked in without acknowledging him, and he barked at me, "You're welcome!" And I think that moment really demonstrates the contempt in which officers hold the public that they protect and serve, and the aggressive and hostile temperament, Chief Moore, of people who want to do this awful job. And it also illustrates why these meetings should not be held at the place that is the seat of police power and where officers feel the most empowered to do that kind of bullying. Welcome, Commissioner Garcia. I don't know much about you except that you worked for, quote, homeboys industry, as Chief Moore called it. But I know enough to know that you have voluntarily stepped into what is an utter sham of a city institutional body. I don't know how much you know about this meeting, but before the pandemic, each person here was allowed to submit multiple comment cards that allowed you up to 2 minutes to speak after each agenda item. So not only were we not forced to give public comment on what was going to be presented at that day's meeting before we heard what happened at the meeting, but we would have a chance to step up individually after each thing happened and say what we thought about it. That was yanked away from us during the pandemic due to stated concerns about like Zoom limitations and technology. And now it's still the case that it's all restricted to 45 minutes. This petty tyrant Southers is already telling people who showed up at this meeting and took the time to put in comment cards before the meeting started that they aren't going to get to speak today. You're the citizen's voice in police affairs. Do you know that, according to the Police Commission website? So what you're stepping into is a body that does that to people who took the time to come down and give comment. And it would be great to comment on individual items. Today's agenda, your very first, Commissioner Garcia, includes dozens and dozens of thousands of dollars in donations to the police. Just to consider item 3C, which includes a $19,500 donation for 77th Street area morale and a $20,000 donation for North Hollywood morale. These donations are considered, according to the agenda, to be routine and non-controversial. Are they? What does a donation for morale even mean? Why is 77th Street morale in $500 worth of better shape than North Hollywood's? When you bow to the pressures of this institution and inevitably rubber stamp those donations on through, I wonder if some ember of conscience will briefly flicker within you. Southers, you are a petty tyrant like Briggs before you. Why do you force people? Why do you say 45 minutes is going to be up without letting a handful more people step up here and give their public comment? They come down to this meeting to give those public comments and they put their cards in, and you do this thing where you say, no, you're not going to get to speak, and you know what's going to happen. We're all going to play our parts. We'll start yelling. I came down to give my public comment. You'll say you're disrupting the meeting.
Had your
This is your
additional
one
20
warning.
seconds, your time has expired.
I'm going to
The Board of Police Commissioners cannot conduct an orderly meeting because people are refusing to acknowledge the 45 seconds. This creates an actual disruption. If it does not stop immediately, I will order the room cleared pursuant to California Government Code, Section 54957.9. The Board of Police Commissioners cannot conduct an orderly meeting. If you don't cease and desist, we will be removed. Because the disruptions have not stopped and the board is unable to conduct an orderly meeting, I am ordering the room cleared pursuant to California Code Section 54957.9. The commission will recess until the room is cleared. Thank you. The commission meeting will resume. We will now go to agenda item number 3, the consent agenda items. I have a question on item A. I'd just like to know from the other commissioners if there are any questions or comments on items B, C, D, or E.
No questions from me.
None for me.
None.
Commissioner Calanche? No. None? Okay. With that, I'd like to move that we accept items B, C, D, and E. Is there a second?
Motion been made and seconded with the provision that with respect to item 3B, we transmit that to the mayor and city council as well.
Thank you. It's been moved, seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. I'd like to ask Chief Graham to come up on item A. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Commissioners. I introduce Lieutenant Melody Hainline. She is the officer in charge of my contract compliance unit for transit services.
Morning.
Good morning. So, rather not go through, unless we need to, the entire report, I just had a question, and if nothing else, a request. On page 11 of the report, item 3.0, it's on community policing. I believe there's a provision for an annual report that comes back to the department from this action. I wanted to know if we could have a presentation to the Board of Police Commissioners, at least semi-annually, per the elements outlined in the contract as it relates to community policing. My concern is I'd just like to know what they're doing at least twice a year to fulfill that particular element of the contract.
Absolutely, sir. We'll reach out to Mr. T. Frank's office and get that on calendar. And we'll have a presentation submitted to you. We'll do the first one before the end of the year, and then we'll start a cycle of biannual reports to the Police Commission, if that's acceptable to you, sir.
Absolutely. And again, I just think it's important for us to understand what that climate's like more often than once a year.
Absolutely, sir. We'll be happy to
Thank you.
comply.
Any other commissioners have any questions or comments on item A?
Well, now since Deputy Chief Graham is here.
Hello, sir.
Hello. My question, Chief, flows from a recent article that I read, perhaps in the Times. It did an analysis of crime trends on various metro lines. I believe it identified the red line as being the most problematic. As I understand it, it was backed up by statistical data. Since you are aware of the issues presented by the red line, what steps is the department actively taking or will take, given the adoption of this new contract, to at least cut down on the crime that is occurring on that line?
So, thank you, sir. First of all, the quick perspective being the red line is our most problematic line because of geography. It's the line that is completely underground, which makes the policing of that line the most challenging, both from a policing standpoint, a security standpoint. And MTA is also dealing with technology inconsistencies across that line. And I know they're working hard at doing a technology assessment for closed circuit cameras so that they can modernize their system throughout the red line. In an environment like a completely contained subway system, having a closed circuit television system, perhaps with the addition of video analytics, would be very helpful from a security standpoint to keep that area or to increase the safety for that area. So one of the things that we looked at in the implementation of Modification 8 at the direction of the Chief of Police is to sort of go away from the model that we had signed 7 years ago, where we had looked at deployment as a line by line solid, this is how many police officers are assigned to this line, and adopt what we know is a core competency as the LAPD, which is the crime control process and having our deployment be governed by the crime control process. So on Tuesdays, my captain and the staff from Transit Services Division have collaborative meetings with Long Beach, the Sheriff's Department, and the Metro Transit Security, where we can analyze both the crime trends that are occurring. And the other thing that we have to take into consideration is when you look at crime from a perspective of statistics per ride, it's actually very, very low. Now, there's no statistic, like I've said before, that I'm going to put out that's going to tell a crime victim that you weren't victimized. But a Part 1 crime for every 4 to 5 million rides is relatively low. So we also have to take other inputs into place, and MTA has those systems in place. There's an internal employee system called Lessers, which is a law enforcement, help me out, service request, where employees of the MTA can initiate direct contact or direct. They can initiate contact with law enforcement through their MTS department in order to look into quality of life issues or other issues that are perceived by the employees as to be a law enforcement related danger to the system. So we take those into considerations when we do our deployment decisions. And then also calls for service, which is a normal component of our deployment piece. But there's also the more informal interactions. So to the president's comments, one of the activities that my senior lead officers are consistently engaged with is a practice called participating in rap sessions. So the bus operators, train operators, through their union have regular rap sessions that are done by their particular divisional geographical subdivisions, where their operators get in a room with various entities within MTA and have the discussions about what they're experiencing from a real sense in the bus, in those seats as bus drivers and train operators. And so my senior lead officers go to all of those rap sessions, and what they bring back to our crime control process is that on-the-ground perspective from the operators, so that we're not just being governed by relatively small crime statistic numbers, but really what people are perceiving on the lines. There's also a public-facing application called Transit Watch app, which we are engaged with MTA in a full court press. I know they spent millions of dollars on a marketing campaign to get the awareness of this application out there. And it is a public-facing, real-time communication with the MTA as to what people are seeing on the lines. And so as we get that information in, we've empowered our watch commanders to make resource adjustments throughout the system and actually take officers from areas that have fewer crimes or fewer reported incidents and then transfer them over to the red line. So over the since March, we've really focused on the red line. as an issue with crime. I presented before, and I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I will bring them for our actual presentation and talk about the combined enforcement posture and community outreach posture that we're taking towards the red line. I'm particularly happy with the response that our officers had with the unfortunate incident that happened last week. After that incident had occurred, and I just want to point out that when the victim got off the train, he stumbled into the arms of 2 police officers because they were where they were supposed to be doing the job that they were supposed to be, and they tried their best to save his life. But as a response to that, my captain immediately rearranged resources so that we can focus on that Pershing Square area, not just to attempt to find information about the crime, but also because we know that that's going to shatter the transit community that goes through there regularly, and they need to see those officers. So we immediately redeployed police officers and our canine units to be there to show that we are actively working this case and we are focusing on crime on that line. Our senior lead officers the next day deployed out there and put out a pop-up information kiosk at Pershing Square so that they can interact with the community and exchange information and push the Transit Watch app so that more inputs come into MTA officers. So all that to say, as we continue to move through this contract relationship with MTA, we're discovering that our core competencies in policing should be what applies to how we deploy police officers. We've gotten a lot of partnership from the MTA as to the utilization of their MTS officers because the enforcement of code of conduct and the enforcement of fair enforcement, which goes hand in hand with disorder, is the purview of the Metro Transit Security. So having us deploy interoperably with them is also a key component to our strategy and success. So we're going to continue to empower our watch commanders to be flexible in the moment and our command staff at the operational level to utilize LAPD's core competency of crime control to determine how we deploy resources.
Thank you, Chief.
Chief, I'd just like to mention, thank you for the RAP sessions information. I would love, if you wouldn't mind making when and where those actually occur, and if commissioners could attend, would be
certainly
really great. With that, I just want to make you aware that, as you know, police departments, particularly this one, have gone to de-escalation and conflict resolution courses outside of the department, outside of post. The city of El Monte decided to put its bus drivers through those same de-escalation courses that the police officers were going through because they're encountering these people on the bus first. And they found it to be quite helpful. Their mayor, at least former mayor, she was very, very progressive, extremely would lean forward into these kinds of opportunities. And those bus drivers, 2 things happened. We had a relationship formed between the bus drivers and the police officers, and more importantly, the bus drivers felt like they had a tool they could use when they had people on the bus that perhaps they could at least negotiate with until officers were arriving. So something to consider. I don't know if they're still doing it, but they found it to be quite useful.
I think based upon the historic relationship between MTA and the Sheriff's Department, they utilize the Sheriff's Department for de-escalation training for their operators. We have offered to add our flavor to that discussion, but at least at this particular time, they're utilizing the Sheriff's Department for that particular training.
Excellent, that's good to hear. Any other questions or comments from my fellow commissioners?
I have a quick question.
Absolutely. Commissioner Kalanche.
Ma'am.
Thanks for that presentation, impromptu presentation. I downloaded the LA Metro Transit Watch app. So wondering, I mean, it's kind of cool that it's more like a security feature, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't allow you to call like 911 or anything like that. So I'm wondering if if we're encouraging riders to use this.
We're making sure to clearly delineate that a crime in progress is still a 911 call. This Transit Watch app is to report disorder or to report those lower vandalism incidents, or maybe somebody sleeping on the system, something that is not exigent in its necessity for response.
Yeah, I get that, but if, say that most people are on this app, I'm not asking you to change the app, but I'm just like, it's a feedback where Like if you're on this, if there could be like a way to click to, I don't know, something just for feedback.
You know, man, we are actually talking consistently with MTA about their application software, so I will certainly bring that up.
Yeah,
That there
I mean,
might be a pop-up
instead
or
of like, okay,
something.
let me close this app and then
Sure.
redial, and I went wherever you could just click and it dials. Because I can click call Metro Security and it takes me to the phone number, right, easily.
I will certainly convey that suggestion back to MTA.
Since everybody's on their phone all the time.
Yes, ma'am, that's very true.
Thank you.
Thank you for the suggestion.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Chief, thank you very much.
Thank you, members of the commission.
With that, I will move that we approve the department's report. Is there a second?
Second, with the proviso that we also transmit it to the mayor's office.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, motion carries. We will now recess into closed session.
Nope.
Oh, no, we won't.
No.
Mr. President, have regular
Sorry.
items.
Items 4A and B.
That's why I stick with paper. We'll go to agenda item number 4, regular agenda items, and I would love to have Deputy Chief Rada. Thank you, sir. You were moments from a clean getaway.
Almost.
Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners, and congratulations, Commissioner Garcia, on your appointment. So in line with the department's guiding principle of reverence for human life and as part of our continuing efforts to improve our ability to de-escalate and safely end public encounters that involve the potential for the use of force, the department desires to conduct a pilot program for the use of Axon's new TASER 10. We have conducted a test and evaluation of this new TASER technology and believe that it has the potential to be a substantial improvement over the TASER 7, the model that the officers are currently deploying in the field. The TASER 10 provides several key improvements when compared to the TASER 7 that we believe should have a substantial impact on officers' ability to utilize de-escalation principles, such as time, distance, and cover, to decrease the intensity of encounters where there's potential for the use of force. Some of those things that we would like to highlight in improvements. There is a substantial increase in the maximum deployment range for the TASER 10, which is now 45 feet, compared to the TASER 7, which has a maximum range of 22 feet. This permits officers to have a greater distance from the suspect or subject. The new device also enhances the time to make a decision, redeploy if necessary, allow officers to utilize cover, and provide the opportunity to use other de-escalation techniques, preventing the potential need for the use of higher level of force. The cartridge now contains 10 probes versus the traditional 2-probe cartridge in the TASER 7, which gives the user up to 9 opportunities to achieve neuromuscular incapacitation. The enhanced accuracy of the single probe deployment and 10 probe cartridge will improve the effectiveness of the TASER when it does need to be deployed. Energizing the platform or turning on the device provides a loud, audible alert with a pulsating bright light that provides the officer with another option that can be used for de-escalating the situation. Also, during the 5-second activation, at the 3-second mark, the device will beep and a haptic battery will vibrate to alert the officer that the 5-second cycle is about to end. There's an improved laser for sighting accuracy, especially during daylight. There's no longer a need to switch between short and long-range cartridges. The TASER 7 will also integrate into the evidence.com system, which allows the department to access pulsating graphs, weapon activity, and event logs. And there's no longer a drive stun mode. The implementation plan, this will be a 1-year pilot program with a 6-month review and a report back to the Board of Police Commissioners. In order to determine the divisions that we'd like to pilot the program, we reviewed use of force data from 2020 to 2023, specifically cases that involved the use of the TASER. The divisions that were chosen were Southeast, 77th, Central, and Hollywood. We will assign approximately 200 TASER 10 devices per division. Train the trainer instruction will begin mid-October with an anticipation date of training field personnel in mid-November of this year. Instructors who have already completed the 16-hour electronic weapons transition train-the-trainer course will be required to complete a 2-hour TASER 10 transition course prior to being able to instruct other personnel. Those who haven't had the 16-hour instructor course will need to complete it before instructing. All current personnel authorized to carry the TASER 7 will need to complete a 2-hour student course prior to deploying the TASER 10. There will also be a QR code survey that will be supplied to all personnel, which will allow for feedback and usage from the officers. In addition, divisional training coordinators will be tasked with providing feedback regarding the device and its use. Of note, during the the testing and evaluation, the training division personnel randomly selected 59 personnel to handle and manipulate the TASER 10. No cartridges were deployed at this time, it was just for manipulation. We provided them with a QR code with questions related to the testing and evaluation. Some of the highlights from that survey of the 59 personnel. 67% found it easier to use the safety activation lever on the TASER 10. 98% felt it easier to reach the safety lever. 87% felt that the activation and the turning on that causes the audible device and the flashing light is a deterrent de-escalation tool. 91% felt confident being able to obtain the required 2 probe contacts and make their TASER 10 effective. And 82% preferred to carry the TASER 10 versus the TASER 7. So very high percentages with that 59-person survey. So we're looking forward to the field testing of the TASER 10, providing officers with a new and effective tool that we can utilize in the field. I welcome any questions at this time.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions or comments for Chief Reyna?
Chief, did I hear you correctly that the officers who will be deployed with the TASER 10 will have 2 hours of training?
Yes, so they have to, they're already, if you're already TASER 7 certified with the training, they get a 2-hour student update course that they have to mandated to go through to learn how to deploy and use the TASER 10.
Okay. And the TASER 10, correct me if I'm wrong, deploys, for lack of a better word, 1 dart at a time, correct?
Correct.
And what an officer wants is actually 2 darts successfully deployed.
That's correct. And the main difference between the TASER 7, if I pull the trigger in the TASER 7, 2 darts are simultaneously being deployed. In this case, on the TASER 10, pulling the trigger for 1 dart and then pulling the trigger for another dart, so it gives you better opportunity to have those contacts on the subject or suspect.
So my concern is whether or not 2 hours is sufficient training.
That is the time recommended by Axon, the time from our tactics instructors and previous instructors, our SMEs, I believe is appropriate time for the instruction, but we could look at that again.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner, if I could help reassure you also, I've personally utilized this tool, and the larger aspect of the deployment of TASER goes to the policy as to the threshold needed in order to successfully delineate that this is an opportunity for a TASER as a de-escalation tool. The simplification of the targeting of it, because it is, you no longer have to worry about spreads and the array of 2 darts going out simultaneously. It is a much more simpler suspect. It's much like, I will hate to use it, well, I'll use the analogy of a stapler. You're essentially placing the first dart and then placing the second dart, and it literally is just what I've discussed, about that much of a time frame. So, meaning it's about a second and a half between the two. The session of spending that, I think the safety mechanism, getting that muscle memory is going to be really important. What we saw going to the TASER 7 actually was a problem with the TASER, the way the positioning of the safety mechanism works. TASER Axon has simplified this process so that we're not pulling a trigger and activating a safety, and that interplay is much, they've heard the users complain about the accidental discharge of a TASER, and the new mechanism simplifies and overcomes that problem.
Thank you, Chief, because that was part of my concern with the training. It's basically an officer acquiring the target, whatever body part, for the first deployment, and then within the time it takes to deploy the second dart, the suspect could move.
Right.
And so those seconds count. And where that is placed, as we've learned from the TASER itself, if there's a widespread, I mean, it can affect, how it affects the body, the muscle, or, and then if it's a smaller spread, it can also, I think it's less effective if I recall correctly. So I was just, that's why I said, in terms of the training, is the training going to be on a static board, which, has some utility, or is it actually going to be on, you know, a movie?
Well, are you available?
No. I've already done that, Chief. I already volunteered. So-
I think Chief Reyna has something to
Yeah,
add.
if I can add, they're, for lack of a better term, like dummies in a sense that we're going to be used on.
Mannequins.
So it's not a board. So
Mannequins.
mannequins, rubber. I can't think of the term they use. Axon uses for these devices, but they look like a person in a sense, and then they can. So the probes are attaching to it, so you're not just shooting at a cardboard board or some type of plywood or something.
We will, though, to your point, I think part of the pilot is to learn what we can learn from it. And that's where the orientation and then returning and coming back. The taser use as a department overall for the entire department was just over 200 instances last year. So we're taking a subset here of 800, just over 800 personnel in 4 divisions. So the instances of, and we are using divisions that have had the highest utilization, thinking that that likely is the population set that we see the greatest frequency in which officers are confronted with a situation that merits or it's reasonable to use that. But I would anticipate that that means over a course of a year that the number of times in which we'll actually see this weapon deployed could be 30, 40, maybe 50 times. And we're choosing essentially with 4 areas, we're choosing, what is that, 1/5 the number of areas, so essentially 1/5 the number of activations. So we're gonna have to learn as we go with this, and I suspect that I know there'll be feedback with carrying it, deploying it, feedback from the officers. This would be alone if it was the first system that we did not give manufacturers meaningful feedback. Each of these evolutions we've taken and given them feedback as to how to build a better device, if you would, with what additions or what modifications. And I'm hopeful to see the same here.
Great. Thank you, Chief.
Commissioner Kalanche.
Thank you. My question is around the implications of having 2 different tasers deployed at the same time. Has that been discussed? Does the manufacturer, have any thoughts on that, since you'll have 2 different tasers interacting,
Well,
or
so,
not interacting, but deployed?
so first off, the manufacturer does not have any concerns if it happened to be where a Taser 7 and a Taser 10 were deployed at the same time. Our policy states that 1 taser usage at a time, and that's where we call out the taser, make everybody know and aware before that taser usage. There will be an educational piece to this as it's rolled out, that department-wide for the educational piece, to let everybody know that we have a different taser device out there. It is a different color. It is yellow compared to the green Taser 7s that we have. So people will be able to see that, and the department will put that out to everyone to be aware that if it happens to be where Central is on the border with Newton and there's an incident, Newton officers are there, they are made aware that there's 2 different color tasers that are deployed, and that the yellow would be the Taser 10. So we will do that educational piece.
Okay, so at least there'll be awareness.
Yes.
Okay, I'm just wondering. Thank you.
Vice President Shields.
Thank you. I had a couple questions. Chief Reyna, can you just explain a little bit to, and more for kind of like the public to understand, with the Taser 7, there are 2 probes, and the Taser 10 has 10 probes. Does that mean that the Laser 10 is 5 times more powerful, or is it the same voltage that is actually released once
It's
contact is
actually
made?
the same voltage. The Taser 10 has 1,000 volts. Actually, it's a little bit less. The Taser 7 is 1,500 to 2,600 depending, so it's a little bit less in voltage, but still has the same efficiency and effective rate. And as far as the probes, regardless if it's 2 probes that make contact or 4 probes that make contact, the software and the device find immediately the 2 probes that have the best connections, and only those are causing the circuit. The other probes are, in a sense, disengaged and don't work.
So this lessens the concern that if there's multiple probes being deployed, that there's not going to be an overcharging happening.
If there happens to be 6 contacts of probes on a subject, only 2 with the circuit are activated.
Okay, thank you. And the Taser 10 also eliminates the drive stun mode. Can you explain a little bit about how that's also going to be trained to officers who may have previously used the drive stun, which is less effective than the probe mode.
Yes, so in that 2-hour instruction, it will be discussed the differences obviously between the TASER 10 and TASER 7 with the probes, but also the fact that it doesn't have that drive stun mode, so you cannot revert to that, whether it's a direct drive stun or the probe drive stun activation like they had on the TASER 7. But that will be covered in the 2-hour instruction and be very clear to those officers that are deployed that they no longer have that drive stun.
And Commissioners, if I could, for the public that are listening on this and trying to understand, the weapon system itself, it's meant, its primary and most effective use is a neuromuscular capacitation. For the public, what that means is that the use of electricity that does not impact the cardiovascular system, but it's meant to impact the nervous system. There's different types of nervous systems you're wiring as an individual. This neural incapacitation goes to your voluntary muscles, i.e. your legs, your arms, stomach muscles, and it effectively, by using electrical circuit, which takes 2 probes, across the path of the distance between those 2 probes, immobilizes or freezes up those muscles. That is the benefit that we look to the use of this system is the better targeting of those probes gives us the best chance of immobilizing the muscle set, which then allows us to overcome the resistance and effectively take the person into custody without having to resort to a higher level of force. So the drive stun, however, is a feature of the device that recognizes that the probes in its earlier versions, such as the TASER 7, don't always have the necessary spread or make the necessary contact in order to formulate that circuit that allows for this neuromuscular incapacitation. Then it allows the officer, in place of that deployment, to do what is essentially a pain compliance technique. The device has 2 probes, very short probes, but much like a spark plug, if you would. And imagine that spark plug being applied to your stomach or to your back or to your leg. It's not going to incapacitate the muscle, but it is going to have a substantial amount of pain. The type of injury is typically maybe a skin irritation rather than a burn or any type of deep tissue issue, but it is much like electrical shock. It is extremely painful. It does, again, not impact the cardiovascular circuitry, but it does create that pain. What we have seen in the impact of this, though, is that sometimes it can be counterproductive because the person we're attempting to restrain interprets whether they're under the influence of a narcotic or alcohol or other substance or having a mental health distress or circumstance, can take the pain and try to fight through it and actually increase the aggravation or actually increase their exertion, which can, independent of the taser, create a health consequence or a serious health consequence for the individual who's trying to overcome. I'll equate this to having a fight with your younger brother or perhaps your older brother. You probably not so much the case as myself with 3 younger brothers, but there's a point in time where you're down and they just keep doing something that annoys you, that no matter how much it hurts, you're going to fight through that. That's not the scenario that we want. We want to avoid that scenario. In fact, our officers are trained to constantly evaluate when they get into the loop of where that pain compliance just seemingly is having this person continue to escalate when we're attempting to de-escalate. By taking this new tool that allows us to better place the darts, the primary use of that weapon system, we think will be achieved. Presently, more than half the times in which we deploy a taser, it's effective. Now, people will say, well, why only half? A firearm is even less effective. What we look to do is with the neuromuscular incapacitation, with the new darts and the manner in which the officer can target from a greater distance and have better penetration through heavy clothing, we look to see that number increase significantly, which will again allow us to quickly de-escalate situations, allow us not to have to escalate and take further more aggressive and more potentially dangerous uses of force, lessen the instances. I will say as a reminder that the TASER document that became a department-wide tool about 2015, I think it was, we saw a reduction in the number of injuries to officers, the reduction in the number of injuries to offenders or to suspects, and we saw a reduction in use of having to resort to lethal force. So the primary purpose of the taser, and people might say, well, why don't you just go the entire agency? One, that would be a substantial financial engagement. Two, the TASER 7 itself is still an effective tool. We just think this is an enhancement that we want to explore, better understand before we make that larger leap.
Thank you, Chief. I just had one last question, if that's okay. You know, one thing that we've seen with tasers is that, I'm curious to know whether with the officers who've tested the TASER 10, whether there's any, are they better able to handcuff a suspect after the TASER deployment? Because sometimes the wires get all messed out, and I don't know if that's because of the spread with the TASER 7. Is there any benefit with the TASER 10 to more quickly handcuffing the suspect? Have we seen that yet?
We've not seen that because it has not been deployed in the field. So the test and evaluation is within training division on our ranges with our tactics and firearms personnel, using it in different circumstances, testing it, speed, things like that. But we've not obviously tested it on somebody. It's not been used on a person. In our case with LAPD, to be able to evaluate whether or not that's an effective tool to allow us to safely take someone into custody.
I'll say I won't volunteer like Commissioner Briggs, but I will say that during the pilot program, that would be an additional interesting observation that I'd like to know from the officers, whether they've found that to be more easily able to handcuff someone quickly.
That'll be part of the survey that'll go to the officers, and anytime that it is deployed and used, they have to fill out that go to the QR code, fill out that survey, and we'll gather that data, plus any other manipulation data thing that they want to put in there, their comments on that. So we will make sure that's in there.
Thank you. Commissioner Garcia, any questions or comments?
Yeah, a question, but some comments first. So I had the opportunity to use the TASER 7, and I'm glad to hear that we're moving towards the TASER 10. The officers there were able to explain in depth the differences, and I do see the value of trying the TASER 10 really as a tool towards de-escalation because of its accuracy, and also the removing of the probes as a tool towards sort of less useful just agitation. So I'm glad to see that we're trying it, and I'm curious, the officers that end up getting trained and assigned to it, if they move divisions that aren't assigned it, do they then have to be retrained and use the TASER 7, or what happens in that case?
They're already trained in the TASER 7. So, for example, if an officer is assigned to Central Division and then gets trained and deploys the TASER 10, but then promotes or transfers out, that TASER 10 will stay at Central and will be given to a new officer coming into the division. And then that officer leaving would go back to their TASER 7.
And we'll ensure that people are aware. There is weapon orientations. Officers carry various weapon systems. But to your point, weapon confusion, understanding what is in their hand. The device is a bit different as its shape and its color. This is the first device that the organization is staying with as yellow versus what historically we've done with the green. But that's something we will monitor to ensure that people going back to the system know what they have. It is most recently, as the other commissioners are aware, one aspect of the TASER that we have revisited the policy on and strengthened as to its restriction is the use of drive stun. This is an area that we've, policy actually that was just enhanced prior to your arrival, speaks to the limitations, if you will, of the use of reliance upon that tool. So we think that the drive stun aspect of the TASER 7, once an officer's been trained on the TASER 10, it is our expectation that if they go back to the earlier device, or as they do, that they'll follow as with their peers the fact of it discouraging for us to use the drive stun whenever possible.
Thank you.
I have an additional question. I'm sorry.
Certainly.
I meant to ask about the cost of the pilot. Are we incurring the cost, or is it free to us? And then what are the budget implications between the 7 and the 10?
I don't have the full cost here. We are incurring the cost of the pilot.
Oh, the pilot.
And that's also being handled by our ITB section.
So Commissioners, we have been able to realign monies within our existing budget. We are paying for these devices. This is and we're buying the devices. There is a ongoing larger universal contract with Axon that covers not just our tasers, but also our digital in-car video. And in this effort, we have received very favorable, if you will, costing for these devices. But the total overall, I believe, is about $3 million when we look at 3 features. One is these devices, these 800 devices that we're acquiring, plus a enhancement to our digital in-car video with an addition of license plate readers as a feature within that video capture system. And then lastly, something called a live stream. As you may remember from an earlier conversation regarding pursuits, the organization is desirous of testing the ability to live stream digital in-car videos during a pursuit back to a watch commander, and as a third set of eyes, if you will, the 2 officers in a car, but having a watch commander monitor, visually see and actually watch what the digital in-car video is showing. So this is a modification to an existing agreement that allows us to add this feature while we're attempting to add those other 2 features as well as part of our evolution of just improving the performance of the organization through the use of technology.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, is there a significant increase between the 7 and the 10 since it has improved technology? Or you might not know that, but.
I will tell you that I'd rather circle back with you so I can talk accurately, but not a substantial difference.
Yeah.
And the TASER Axon, the company itself, is moving to the 10 as its featured weapon system.
Got it.
And away
So eventually we
from
would
the
be
7.
moving to
Yes.
that TASER 10. Okay.
Yeah, we've had X26, the X26P. This is the relationship with Axon on the use of this weapon system goes back about, well, their predecessors, actually the original company with Rick Smith goes back to the 80s. And it's evolved over the last 40 years.
Thank you.
Chief, I just have a question and a request. The question is, how often will, and to Commissioner Garcia's comment and the chief's, recurring training and familiarity is critical. How often is recurring training for our officers for the TASER?
So currently TASER is, we have the less lethal recertification. TASER is not involved in that program that came out of the After Action report, but we have been in discussion regarding how we can have in a sense, refresher course of recertification every 2 years, like the other less lethal devices, and the monies that would cost for that, and that type of thing, because there are different cartridges that you'd use for training. But there is discussion within Training Bureau and with Chief Choi regarding that, if we can somehow put that on our qualification schedule to have that recertification.
Thank you. And the request, we don't need a lengthy report. It'd be useful to know all of the resources that an officer has, lethal, less than lethal, on their Sam Browne, what the requirements are for the department in terms of recurring training and certification. I would think that if we are ever involved in litigation, that would be the first thing that someone would ask for. And I'd like to just know how often are these things, how are these tools requiring officers to be retrained? I mean, obviously, I understand SWAT's a little bit different and those tools are different, and I know how often they may be on the range, but for the others, my concern is familiarity. And if you're switching to a whole new weapon system, and you've been using one for several years already, that muscle memory kicks in. And if you haven't recurringly trained or been certified with it, you'll revert back to what you've been doing for years, and that's my concern. I'd just like to know if there's a spreadsheet we could have to just tell us how often each tool is being retrained or recertified.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's actually a great point. I think actually, and we'll expand that to use some graphics, because I think it'd be great to just show the equipment belt, and then relative to each have a drop down that shows what the tool set. For instance, officers have to qualify so many times a year with a firearm, and officers in regards to the TASER, in regards to the 40 millimeter, the OC spray, the baton, those are all weapon systems that are used.
Thank you, Chief. You're reading my mind. I was going to say, and everything we keep in the trunk as well.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chief. If there are more questions or comments, I'd like to move that we approve the department's report. Is there a second?
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Chief. I'd like to move to regular agenda item 4B and ask Deputy Chief Pitcher if you'd come up. Thank you, Chief. And if you'd introduce your personnel?
Yes. With me today is Lieutenant Rich Ulley. He is the citywide program coordinator for the Adult Diversion Program. And to my right, your left, is Lieutenant Samer Issa. He is from Juvenile Division. He is a citywide coordinator for the Juvenile Diversion Program. We have a presentation planned for you. We can highlight the points of each of the four, but I think that the report, the fact sheet that was submitted to the board is very accurate. It's very thorough. We're available to present or answer questions or a little of both if you choose.
I'll leave it to my fellow commissioners' presentation.
You took your time to prepare a presentation. Let's see it.
Thank you.
Great. So we'll be providing a brief overview of the highlighted points of the four programs. I'll take the first couple. Very quickly, the first program, which is known as the Ready Adult, REDY, or the Restorative Enhanced Diversion for Young Adults program, is a partnership between the department and the LA County District Attorney's Office. And what that program was planned to do was ultimately to focus on gang members between the ages of 18 and 25, and that program was going to be piloted in four areas: 77th, Newton, Mission, and Foothill areas, and it was going to be inclusive of only 25 gang members who would be arrested for non-serious and non-violent offenses that would be provided with wraparound services. And then ultimately, what sets us apart from everything else is they would be given to individuals, partners that would basically provide them with basically skills and services and apprenticeships. So they would be working with the IBEW, they'd be working with Homeboy Industries. There were other partners that were going to come alongside, take them on in a paid job, give them an apprenticeship, teach them life and job skills, and ultimately let them do this for a year. And if they were able to ultimately finish that, as well as any counseling or therapy or anything else that we be provided by the wraparound services, then they would drop the charges. The district attorney's office would drop the original charge for which they were arrested and brought before the program. However, that program never got implemented. Just before its implementation date earlier this year, the district attorney's office ran out of funding, and ultimately they were having issues getting the partners to be able to refer these individuals to. So that program is now still suspended, but I just had discussions with them last week, and we're looking at potentially putting that or implementing that program in Operations Valley Bureau. And the reason for that is it's based solely on the DA's funding. They have grants that can only be used in certain places, and in this case, it can only be used in the valley. So they are determining right now if they're going to go forward, and if they will, which divisions they're going to use. My recommendation was Van Nuys and North Hollywood areas, so they are considering those possibilities at this time, but there is nothing concrete as of yet. Negotiations are going to continue. So then the second program that came up that we're going to cover is the COVER program, or the Community Violence Reduction Program. And that was another program that was partnered by the department and the LA County District Attorney's Office, as well as they were going to bring on board other community-based organizations or CBOs to provide wraparound services and referrals to individuals. And that was going to be partnered or piloted in the 77th, Newton, Foothill, and Mission areas, the same as the first one. And you're seeing a commonality in those areas is those were the areas, those were 4 of the 8 original clear areas, the gang areas that were implemented back in the early 2000s. As CLEAR kind of tapers off, they wanted to basically augment the prosecution and services provided to these typical gang crime areas and ultimately make an impact not only in terms of the crime, but also to the individual gang members in terms of turning their lives around. So when we're looking at the Community Violence Reduction Program, the intent was to provide a collaborative effort at each of these 4 geographic areas. And they were going to assign 1 full-time district attorney and 2 full-time district attorney investigators to work with patrol, to work with community relations, to work with detectives, and also the gang units. And what they were going to do was to vertically prosecute the most violent of crimes to impact the crime rates in the community that were gang-related, and then also at the same time work with the CBOs to provide the wraparound services to the gang members that they came into contact with, as well as family members, to basically make an impact in the community as well. So both crime and any of the societal issues that they saw, they were going to work very closely with. However, due to the staffing concerns that were impacting and still are impacting the DA's office, they basically implemented that in only a limited portion. And so what we have today is it's basically hanging on a thread. They have 1 district attorney that is assigned part-time, and that means 1 week a month to assist, and that DA works with all 4 of those areas. So basically, when I last talked to him, he gets out about 3 days a month to help the 4 divisions. So that severely hampers anything that he was going to try to do. And so basically what he is limited in doing is providing advice, providing training, and providing direction to the areas on an extremely limited basis. And the fact that we have no DAIs or district attorney investigators there, that precludes a lot of the investigative efforts that were going to go on and planned to go on in each of those areas. And they were also going to use those DAIs to work with the CBOs in each of those 4 areas to pull them together for the wraparound services, to meet the community issues and the concerns that were going on and to help with our community relations officers and senior leads to meet the serious needs that were identified in each of these 4 areas. But as we spoke about, the DA has limited staffing. They can't put anybody else in there. So basically what the department is doing is we're relying on, and what we're doing is making our referrals to JDAP, to the Juvenile Diversion Program. We're making sure that each of those 4 areas is engaged in that, as well as making the referrals ultimately to the GRID program. They're making numerous, in fact, going above and beyond, making referrals to the Gang Reduction Youth Development Program in terms of getting them counseling, guidance, mentorship, and other services. And also, we're following up. I also run CompStat, so I get a chance to basically impact and inspect all of the 21 geographic areas. So not only these 4 areas, but every area, every one of the 21 geographic areas, I look at their GRID referrals, I look at their juvenile diversion process, all of the arrests that are made of juveniles, why they were referred and why they were not. And ultimately, we talk about the process to make sure that we're diverting every juvenile and every arrest or adult arrest that we possibly can. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rich Ulley. The 3rd program we're going to talk about is the Adult Diversion Program that is with the LA County JCOD, or Justice, and I can't remember the acronym on that. I'll let you speak about it.
Good afternoon, everyone. So a little background on the Alternatives to Incarceration Program, or known as ATI. Back in February of 2019, the County Board of Supervisors passed a motion that paved the way for this program, which essentially brings together the department, the District Attorney's Office, the City Attorney's Office, and the County Office of Diversion and Reentry. This is a pre-filing diversion program for adults, and it is focused on diverting individuals in three categories: the individuals who are experiencing homelessness, substance abuse disorder, or mental health disorders, who were arrested for select misdemeanors and nonviolent, non-serious felonies, to divert them away from the traditional criminal justice system towards community support programs in lieu of filing the criminal charges. So essentially, all the adult offenders are screened by department personnel to determine their eligibility for the program. And once they're screened, they go, after the screening process is done, then they are assessed by a navigator. LA County is currently using Health Right 360 as their services navigator. So then the arrestee would be presented to the navigator, who would offer them the opportunity to participate in one of several community-based support programs that they work with. If the arrestee chooses to participate in the program, then, and they're deemed suitable to participate, then they would be released to the care of the navigator and be referred to the community-based support programs that are available to them. To qualify for graduation from the program, the city attorney's office requires 90 days successfully completed, whereas if they, for the district attorney's office, it's 180 days of continuous participation in an approved program. So in doing those, that would be considered successful participation in graduation. Of course, a person could decline to or be found not suitable to participate in this program. But for someone who does, once they complete either the 90 or 180 days, depending upon the misdemeanor or felony charge, then they would be issued they would consider to be a successful graduate. They would be issued a certificate of release, which basically notifies the state that their arrest was a detention only, and that'll show on their record and won't follow them around as an arrest or prosecution. The department started participating in this program in in June of 2021, and it was limited to the 77th Regional Jail, and that was at the request of the Justice Care and Opportunities Department, which is what they became. The original name was Alternatives for Incarceration, and that's what the program's still referred to. But there was limited success at that location due to a significant number of arrestees being booked there were ineligible for the program, either based on their booking charges or exclusions in their criminal histories. In addition, there was also, and this is the big sticking point, and it still currently is, was the implementation of zero bail. Because the zero bail charges directly overlap with the approved misdemeanors and the eligible charges for the program. So that seriously impacts the arrestee's decision-making process as to whether or not they want to sign up for a 90 or 180-day commitment when they can just literally be out of jail soon, and in the current environment with the probability of charges not being filed being significant. So that was a significant impediment to success at 77th Jail. So JCOD then requested to shift operations this past May over to the Metropolitan Detention Center, where it's currently in place, to potentially hopefully increase the number of qualified offenders into the program. But lo and behold, about a week after that transition occurred, due to the preliminary injunction, zero bail came back. So it is essentially the same problem all over again. And just anecdotally, there's been a little bit more participation. There's been a little bit of a wider pool of people eligible for the program, but we're talking very small numbers, not even in the double digits. So the increase in participation has been pretty minuscule. In the report, we have cited just basically the numbers of, since program inception, number of people have been screened. It's been well into the thousands. And as of May of this year, the number here is 1,316, but it's a little bit more than that now of people that have been screened. But I do have a statistic of what we have to date, and the numbers are, so this is going back to the inception of the program, which is a little over 2 years now. So out of all the thousands of arrestees now at both locations who have been screened, total qualified for diversion has been 342 people, and of that, eligible pool, 245 declined to participate. 97 accepted, but unfortunately 65 people absconded, basically, or reported for noncompliance. There's only 4 active, currently pending cases in the system right now, and to date, 28 people have graduated this program in over a 2-year period. So those are some of the current figures. The intent by Health Right 360, the service provider, was to measure recidivism, but since they've advised that since there's been such a low number of participation, they haven't felt that that would be productive at this point. So they're waiting to see if more numbers present themselves. But again, the elephant in the room is zero bail. That is essentially the current state of affairs with the program.
And then the last program that we're going to look at is the department's longest-running program, the Citywide Juvenile Arrest Diversion Program, and Lieutenant Samarais is going to be discussing the high points of that.
Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon. I'm going to briefly talk about the Juvenile Arrest Diversion Program, which I will refer to as the JDAP. This applies to juveniles who commit non-serious, low-level crimes, mostly misdemeanors, but in some cases they're felonies when it comes to property crimes and such. Juveniles are from 12 to 17 years old. This program started in 2013 in 77th Division, and since then it has spread throughout the entire city. As of 2021, all 21 divisions participate in the program and have been since. In the last few years, there's been an average of about 400 referrals a year. At the same time, we have experienced some challenges with the community-based organizations, and I refer to as CBOs. Some of the CBOs depleted their funding, so they were unable to continue with their programs, which made it a challenge for us to find other CBOs. And also, there was a lack of communications between the department and the CBOs as far as the referrals and the progress and the completion or non-completion of these programs on the juveniles' behalf. So the department started to work with the LA County Division of Youth Development, which I would refer to as a DYD. And DYD will become our point of contact. It'll be basically our contractor, just one point that we deal with DYD, and DYD will have contracted with the CBOs. And they will vet the CBOs, their contractors, as far as make sure they do have the financial funds to continue with the program so there are no interruptions. Make sure they have the insurance, the locations, and so forth. On August, for the past over a year, we've been working with DYD on a memorandum of agreement. The Chief Moore just signed it in August, and that was enable us to move forward with solidifying the relationship with DYD and basically eventually have DYD cover the entire city, which is all 21 divisions. As the chief mentioned, that through CompStat, he does follow through with the divisions as far as the referrals, and if the juveniles do qualify, they do get referred to DYD, and if they don't, the reason why, there are sometimes or instances that they don't qualify, or there's other stuff that comes in the way that we don't refer them to the DYDs. Any questions?
Questions, anyone? Commissioner Briggs.
Thank you, President Suthers. Chief Pitcher, correct me if I'm wrong, but the DA gets its funding from the county, correct?
I would assume.
And so it's the county that's not funding these programs, the ones that you mentioned, the Ready Adult and the Cover program. Because you mentioned that the DA doesn't have the funding for these programs, right?
Correct.
So we have two very good programs that would divert gang members, help them find new lives, but the county's not stepping up to the plate and funding these programs.
I don't know if that's an issue of, the direction they want to go or not. And I know they were having issues getting partners to refer them to also. So it wasn't just monetarily, it was also the partnership aspect once they referred these individuals, they had to have somebody on the back end provide the apprenticeships and the jobs and the training and everything else.
But you have those nonprofit organizations such as Homeboy Industries and other organizations out there that are willing to step up. I mean, it seems to me that they're in place, but it's the initial funding of those programs from the county that seems to be lacking here. Has the DA said that it was going to approach the county commissioners about obtaining funding, or seek funding from the state government, or seek funding from perhaps the U.S. Department of Justice by way of a grant?
They had grants, and once again, for the Ready Adult, they decided that that could be back on. Ultimately, they're making that determination which divisions in the valley to go forward with. That was tied to grant funds, and those grant funds, I was told by the program director for the DA's office, that it had to be used in the valley. So they were determining which was the best division for placement of those. And so I think that could be back on in the next month or so, based on their opinion. But as it gets back to the cover program, I think that's all staffing. And the staffing is they don't have it. They don't have the ability to staff, as they had designed the program to originally. The way to make the big impact is to staff the divisions with their individuals, and they just do not have the bodies to do that. And in fact, they're closing units down on their end, to basically cover their obligations and responsibilities. So they said they just do not have the staffing to carry out the community violence restoration program, the COVER program.
Is that because they are not hiring, can't hire, or what's the problem?
The last discussion I have, and the chief may have more information on this, but they were down over 275 trial attorneys. And so ultimately, they have pulled back on a lot of different units. I don't know their, organization. I do know that much. And they have staffing issues, yes.
Last question for you, Chief. And you're probably not the right one, but you're in front of me today. So, the zero bail program. Did anyone explain to the judicial officer who granted this preliminary injunction that you're about to kill programs that are helpful to the community by diverting these youths to something that might be productive in their life, rather than simple turnstile justice and allow them to go out and recommit crimes?
Yes, I've been working with the chief of police on this zero bail issue quite closely, and I know that he has addressed that in his testimony to the judge who placed the preliminary injunction upon the department relative to zero bail, and then also with the judge of the Superior Court, the presiding court judge, as to what the impacts will be for zero bail, and that was one of them, yes.
Commissioner, if I could, though, just for the record, to be clear, this discussion deals with adult offenders, not juveniles. Okay. So just actually, the program that is working most effectively is our juvenile diversion, which I'm quite proud of the work of Chief Pitcher, Lieutenant, really the work of Juvenile Division over the years that continues to lead the county in showing a path that we can divert and we can move young people from pre-booking programs into effective programming. I will raise a caution relative to juvenile diversion, though, is that we are seeing in the juvenile justice system some real weaknesses in the sense that of the tracking and the monitoring in a community setting of serious juvenile offenders. So we have, as an organization, the last 13 to 14 years that I can think of very clearly with justice reform, beginning with AB 109 and really beyond that, spent a great deal of time on diversion while we looked at our juvenile justice system, while we looked at our adult incarceration. And what we're seeing now is that there are the limits. In fact, now the overreach of some of these limitations are resulting in, particularly in the juvenile world, a lack of effective community supervision of juveniles who have been found carrying firearms, engaged in violent acts, and serious felonies that are giving us concern. While we continue to see significant declines over time in regards to juvenile crime, what we are seeing is that offenders who pose significant risks to get them on a path to rehabilitate them we're not seeing the type of community supervision that diversion, even the programming that diversions use today, those individuals apparently either are not or will not participate in that programming, which is leaving these individuals without the necessary support, and I believe is resulting in some of them losing their life. We've seen most recently in the last few months, juveniles that have come in contact with the criminal justice system that diversion was an option because of the firearm, because there was violence. But what's not been spoken about here is that law enforcement, and I'm saying it now, needs to be heard, that there are limits to these programs, and some of the other programs that have backstopped or that this was meant to improve on have deteriorated in a sense of holding in a community setting effective supervision and controls. Now, on the adult side, we are talking a follow-up meeting this Friday with the presiding judge, with Sheriff Luna, and we continue to work with them for their revised bail schedule for adults that will be announced, which will go in effect on October 1st. The department is in litigation on this. We will continue to work with our judge in the Superior Court that has us apart from that in an effort to get back to that larger countywide initiative. But whether it be the preliminary injunction that we're currently under, or when people envision book and release on low-level offenses, there is a role for drug courts, and there is a role for individuals to coerce them, for lack of a better term, into programming that is envisioned here that is simply now being said thanks but no thanks. Individuals who are in crisis, individuals who are not motivated to go into something other than under the threat of continued detention, and in the absence of that coercion now, are returning back to a community setting, and oftentimes to their own peril, and other times, many times, engaging or re-engaging in a criminal conduct that brought them to law enforcement's attention to begin with. So we stand committed to working with all of our criminal justice partners. Chief Pitcher has, for a number of years now, been my lead on the the CCJCC, the Countywide Community Justice System Coordinating Committee, which is chaired by a supervisor. Certainly, Commissioner Garcia is well aware of that meeting. They have public meetings each month, and there's a number of initiatives here that we're bringing before that group, because I think that more work needs to be done on both the areas you've described, as well as what I've described on the juvenile justice side.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chief Pitcher.
Thank you. Commissioner Kalanche.
This is really important, and I have a million questions, but which I'll follow up with you later. But I have I guess what's jumping out at me is the city of LA invests over $30 million in GRID programs, and I feel like they're not prominent in this work, right? Like we're focused on funding from the county for youth diversion, but so I'm wondering, maybe I'm wrong, but how are we utilizing the GRID programs, which exist in almost every high need area in the city, to bring all? I mean, part of a GRID program is to have a collaborative of providers at the table that do meet with law enforcement, right, on a monthly. So I'm wondering how we are utilizing our GRID partners more effectively, or how can we use them more effectively to ensure that there are programs for diversion. So that was one. It's kind of a bigger kind of question about like how we can use our existing city services a little bit better, along with the county services. And then the other is the diversion for juveniles. I only saw shoplifting. Are there other things that we divert for? Other types of offenses that we would divert? Yeah, those are two. I mean, I have a lot more, but I think I can follow up later.
Yeah, absolutely. We divert for a lot of offenses, not just shoplifting. And I think one of the things we were trying to do, in fact, we had a lot of the CBOs throughout the county that provide services off and on to the department, ultimately ended up coming to the department. They would run out of funds and they would basically stop and cease operations. And then there were other occasions where we couldn't communicate with them, we couldn't get information from them, we couldn't find out the progress of the individuals that we referred. There was just not a lot of control. And so we entered into negotiations with the Department of Youth Development, which is an LA County entity. And absolutely. And so they came to us and we, through negotiations, tailor-made a response for the department and the city and the stakeholders, which basically they hold every CBO now to a contract, and that contract is extremely detailed as to what they expect from each of the CBOs, like never before. And so they hold all of the CBOs to the fire. They evaluate them. They make sure that they're vetted. They do inspections on the locations. They even have the academicians, their consortium of colleges, conduct an analysis and overview of the programs that they use to make sure, because they are the experts in understanding what programs are appropriate for the juveniles that we are ending up referring to them. So they cover the gamut there. They basically control the CBOs. They pay the CBOs. They ultimately ensure that they are insured properly, that they are vetted, and that their programs are evaluated on a yearly basis so that they are appropriate and give the best amount of service to the communities and to the juveniles we refer. So we wanted to make sure that we had that going with the department, that we weren't chasing, 6 or 7 to 10 different CBOs. So that is done. And then we look at, and they bring in and they vet, and they do RFPs for the many CBOs that they use ultimately to provide the services. Once we refer them, we actually refer the juvenile, any arrested juvenile that's arrested for a variety of charges. We will refer that individual to DYD. DYD then geographically will refer that individual, that juvenile, to the appropriate CBO or CBOs after they do an analysis and an overview as to what services that they need. So they control all of that. We just make the referral and ultimately get the progress reports of the juvenile that was referred, and then hopefully that they get released from their charges when they're successful at the end.
How long would a program take?
6 months. 6 months, I'm sorry.
The program can go anywhere from typically 6 months to even over a year. It depends on the issues that the juvenile is dealing with, whether it's mentorship, whether it's behavioral issues, whether it's addiction issues. It runs the gamut, but they are treated until they are successfully or deemed to be successfully released from that program. And so it can be, like I said, we've seen it, typically around 6 months, but it can go well over a year to 2 years.
I would love to learn more. So maybe I'll follow up with you and
And Commissioner, you asked specifically, is it just a shoplift? These are all nonviolent offenses. So auto theft, residential burglary are and can be diverted depending on the background of the individual, and then low-level violence such as a fight or battery that doesn't involve a firearm can also be included. What's critical to this and really in all this is a supportive or supportive either parental setting or guardian or supportive structure or something outside of law enforcement, because there's a parental aspect of this as well. And it's an unfortunate reality that when we look at situations that are not divertible, what we find through the constant inspections and oversight by watch commanders is that there's not a parental figure that's willing to, in something you've seen, that's willing to invest.
Yes.
And we try to find ways, for instance, there may be an employment issue or maybe stability of the home is in question. So we try to find advocates and others that will step forward.
Yeah.
And this is really for those that are listening and community-based organizations that feel that they could offer that advocacy. But we want to partner as a means, because we do see successful exits when these young people can get into a productive source out of this lifestyle.
And to your point, one of the challenges that I've seen when I was at Legacy, like trying to get kids, into diversion programs, is that a parent has to participate in the program, or else the young person can't participate. And many times the parent is the problem. So it's like, okay, so the parent doesn't want to participate now, the youth can't be diverted. So we're kind of in this like vicious cycle. So thinking about how other nonprofits or how GRID can act as if it's a GRID client, there's a case manager that meets with these clients like all the time, right? So figuring out how to introduce like these other partners to these organizations that have these contracts, so that we're not turning away a young person because maybe a parent isn't part. There's just a lot of nuances, but I would love to learn more and see how we can support. But thank you.
Okay. Vice President Shields.
Thank you. I'd say with the numbers for the adult diversion programs are a little discouraging, and hopefully if there is a change in the bail, that will increase. I will say that even, all would be, worth it if the 28 people who graduated have kind of turned their life around. And so I would say that even if it's a small sample size, I think it's still worth having someone check to see, any kind of progress reports we know about the people who've graduated. I think that could be a helpful piece of information. And just wanted a quick comment on the juvenile programs. These look great. These look terrific. I actually volunteered at Inside Outriders over a decade ago. If there's ever a need for a commissioner to attend any juvenile programs, please reach out to me. This is something that I'm very passionate about. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
One of the things, Commissioner, that, we didn't want to make it discouraging was that when we entered into this adult diversion program, we were told very succinctly by the individuals, the experts, that it can take as many as 5 to 6 times through diversion for an individual to ultimately become successful. So they could be arrested, go through diversion, complete the program, whether it's 60 days or 180 days, and ultimately get out, be released from their charges, and get rearrested. So the recidivism rate isn't always, we're told, the best way of looking at that, because like I said, it can take 5 to 6 times through a diversion program for this person to ultimately take it seriously and emerge successfully.
Thank you. Commissioner Garcia? No questions? Thank you, Chief. Again, I'd just like to reiterate Vice President Shields' comments that the reasons for declining diversion, those percentages for declining are pretty significant, but you did an excellent job of articulating the lack of incentivation or incentives, because they do the math and they figure out it's just easier to let the clock run out than to engage in the program. And I don't imagine revamping that schedule is in the near future, but as long as that's the schedule, I can't understand why somebody would enroll in the program.
That's exactly right. We had very high hopes when it was going to be shifted to the Metropolitan Detention Center, and we would catch a lot more individuals that we could help with the program. However, as soon as they moved, literally within a week, they announced the reimplementation of zero bail again. And so what we saw originally a couple of years earlier ended up dropping right in our lap again, and ultimately people didn't want to participate.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If there are no further questions or comments, I'd like to move to approve the department's report and transmit to the City Council. Is there a second?
Motion second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carried. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
We will now recess into closed session.
The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss Agenda Item 5A1 in accordance with Government Code 54957.
Okay, the Board of Police Commissioners is back in session, and we'll have a report out by the Executive Director.
Item 5A1, officer-involved shooting number 052-22. Commission on a 5-0 vote approved the recommendations of the Chief of Police, which were tactics, tactical debrief, 3 police officer 2s, administrative disapproval, 1 police officer 3. Drawing and exhibiting in policy, 1 police officer 3, 3 police officer 2s. Lethal use of force in policy, 1 police officer 3, and 1 police officer 2. That concludes the report out.
Thank you, Mr. Executive Director. There's no further business. I'll make a motion that we adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. The motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Meeting adjourned.